Hello, hello, how is everyone doing? Good night, good morning, good afternoon. For those of you that are watching, I can see a couple of people here already on the viewing channel. I know it's very early over there. It's a little bit late over here as well. But we're going to be working for the next 4 hours. Now, before we start, I just want to remind you guys, especially the ones that are here already, that this is an event that's being run in the Discord server. So I will have, we're probably going to have some students on the Discord side of things, which means that I'm going to be paying attention to them, of course, but this is an open class, so you guys are welcome to watch the stream, and if we have enough time, I'll be answering questions here on the chat as well, okay? The class or the event is supposed to start in about 5 minutes. We're going to give a couple minutes for any of the students that are interested to jump into the channel, and then we'll start. This is a beginner level class, so we're going to start from the very basics, or depending on the level of skill that students are rolling with, depending on where they are, we might start with some like more advanced stuff, and after that, yeah, we'll just keep going until we finish a very cool character, okay? So let me open the main like a scene right here. Here we go. Now, before we begin, I just want to let everyone know that we are running a sale right now on our Udemy channel. So you guys can use the All Made 2 code up here. And if you go to Udemy, which I'm actually not sure if it's on the description. It should be. If it's not, let me add it real quick. Oh, I don't think it is. So on the description of the live stream, you can find the link to Udemy, and there you guys can get any of our courses, any of our courses. And we got Alston Henry Rodriguez. How are you, my friend? Welcome. Let me know if the music is a little bit loud or not, and we're gonna be working with this. Share my screen. Right here. Very well, guys. So we're gonna, as I mentioned, we're gonna be working on a character. This is actually the character that we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be doing. He's called the Vigilant. It's the mascot from Paizo. And we're going to be working on him. We're going to be doing the whole thing. I'm doing good, Alston. How are you? How are you doing, my friend? As I mentioned, the event is supposed to be starting right now at 9 p.m. Mexico time. So we're going to wait a couple of minutes for the students that enrolled to show up. If for any reason they're late or something, I'm just gonna start, since all of this is being recorded, and then we'll pick it up once they show up. As long as we have few students on the actual Discord, I'm gonna be able to answer questions here on the YouTube channel. So please, I can see that there's 10 viewers right now, 11 viewers. So if you guys have any question along the way, feel free to just like write it here in the comments. There's no need for like super chat or anything, and I'll be happy to address the question. Again, this is going to be a beginner level like thing, so you can actually follow along. The idea is for you guys to follow along. We're going to be using Blender, and we're going to be using ZBrush, okay? So let's just wait a couple more minutes, and then we'll get this thing started, because it's going to be quite the journey to get this character right here ready. I think it's a really cool concept. I really like this dude. He reminds me a little bit of the, you guys remember the villain from what was it? From Mini Spice? Mini Spice Thumb Villain. This guy's right here. That first movie was so bizarre. I remember loving it as a kid, but it was so bizarre. So this dude that we're gonna be doing, the Vigilant, he's gonna be the main, or we're gonna be following a similar approach right there. Dr. Rooney, how are you, my friend? Hello. I'm glad to be live again. This is gonna be probably the longest stream. Like today and tomorrow are going to be the longest streams I've ever done. They're going to be 4 hours long. So we're going to be here from right now until 1 a.m. Mexico time, just working on this character. And the goal is to make sure that we get it from nothing, like from complete scratch, all the way to the STL that we're going to be using for the 3D print. Then, if things go well, I'm actually going to 3D print it tonight. And hopefully we'll see the final model tomorrow. Tomorrow on the live stream. Tomorrow's live stream is going to be at 10 a.m. Mexico time. And we're going to go from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're going to be doing a different character, but we're going to be following the same sort of like principles and the same sort of like elements right here to get this character to look as nice as possible. So let me really quickly write down that's exactly what I was going to say, Dr. Rini. I'm going to write down the softwares that we're going to be using, okay? So we're going to be using Blender to create the base shapes of our character. Then we're going to be using ZBrush to give a little bit more detail and get to the next level of the character. I'm going to be using a process. This is not the process that I normally use for my professional work, but it's really good for beginners, especially when we're struggling with proportions and stuff. The process that we're going to be using instead of Blender is going to be really handy. Then we're going to jump into ZBrush to add all of the details. We're going to be doing the claw, the accessories, all of the rock details and stuff. And then we're going to be using Cheetahbox. Cheetahbox is the slicer that I use for my 3D print preparation. However, if you have a 3D printer or you want to follow the 3D printing steps, you are welcome to use other softwares such as, I believe there's one called Leeches. Something like this. Like, I think it's that one. Let me look this up real quick. And just make sure that this is the one that we're going to be using. So Leeshi. It's not Leeches. Leeches is the chess app, the free chess app. So it's Blender, ZBrush, and Cheetahbox or Leash. I might be using a little bit of Marmoset toolback to do some renders, but this is not required. This is just for presentation purposes, to make our things look as nice as possible. So this one has like a little star right there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's 9 p.m. already over here. Our start time is on, and we're gonna be starting very shortly. Okay, so I'm just gonna give like 5, maybe 6 minutes to the students to see if they start popping here into the channel, and if not, we're just gonna go. Sounds good? Where's everyone else watching from? Let me know. What time is it where you guys are? Because I know this is a very like weird hour. We normally don't stream at this hour, but it's I'm glad to be here tonight with you guys.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
What are we doing now?
Hi guys, I see Brian and Pinky here in the table.
Yeah, I'm here.
How are you, Pinky?
I know. Be back in a minute.
Sure. Okay, so we got a couple of people here on the room. 4 a.m. One of our watchers from Portugal. Nice. I'm gonna bring the music a little bit lower. 0-0 in Brazil. We got a couple of people watching as well.
Hello?
Hey Pinky, how are you, my friend? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, cool. So, I guess we're about to start then with our session. It's gonna be a cool workflow on how to do things. First of all, I would like to know if you guys have any 3D experience before we start.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, cool. What about you, Pinky? I can't really hear you, Pinky. I'm not sure if the microphone is in a different line or something.
This is your time to enter, reinvent, and take charge in 22 for escape. Rated highest in your loyalty. Escape is the capability to
Pinky, I think I'm gonna have to mute you.
On.
Okay, well, let's get on with this then, my friends. So today we're going to go over the whole process to create a 3D print element for our games. I've been a player for a long time. I started in 3.5 back when I was 13, and I've been playing all kinds of role-playing games. I did Pathfinder 1st edition, and recently we switched with my party to Pathfinder 2nd edition. So it's really cool to be doing this character right here. We're going to be doing the Vigilant, and I want to explain real quick what the process is that we're going to have to do. Now, as you guys know from the inscription, there is a active live stream right now. We got 15 viewers, so I got the chat right here, and I might be answering some of the questions from there as well. So from a 3D creation standpoint, there are three main things that we need to do in order to create our character. The first step is the creation of the base meshes. So we're going to be creating a very simple base mesh for a Vigilant character, which is going to be a simplified version of the figure inside of Blender. This is going to allow us to generate the base shapes that we need so that we can then transfer them into ZBrush. And inside of ZBrush, we're going to be doing the high poly sculpting. We call this the high poly process, usually stands with HP. And we're going to be adding all of the details to the face, the eyes, all of the cracks that we have for our character. Finally, after that little process right there, we're going to jump into our slicer, which in my case, since I have an Elegoo Mars, we're going to be using Cheatbox, and we're going to be talking about the supports that we need to add to the figure. So once the figure is ready, we add this supports. We're going to talk about the 3D printing process at the very end, and we need to add all of the supports to the little figure so that we can finally get our little figure ready to play after the printing process is done. So we're going to start by, again, as I mentioned, opening a Blender. And the first thing we need to decide is what is the scale that we're going to have this character be. So I've been looking at some of the concept arts from this guy, and he seems to be rather large. Not like a super large character, but just large enough so that we can make it a little bit bigger than usual. If we talk about scales, let me go over here. There we go. So if we talk about mini scales, the 28mm scale is usually the one that's used for traditional tabletop. So most of the figures you can find online, like from WizKids and stuff, they are at 28 millimeters. However, people have been changing this quite a bit in the last couple of years, especially due to 3D printing. And I personally like going with the 32 millimeter size, just because it's a little bit bigger. And from a painting perspective, it can also be a little bit easier to paint later on. So we're going to be doing or going with something like that. So inside of Blender, if you've used any 3D software before, we are going to be using just a very basic shapes to understand the form of this character and create our base mesh. So the base mesh is, I would say, one of the most important parts of the whole process, because if we make sure that our base mesh is as clean as possible, then the whole sculpting process inside of ZBrush is going to be a lot easier. One of the issues that I see students struggle with quite frequently is they will start with a very bad base mesh, and therefore when they jump into the high poly, it becomes very complicated to recover from that stage. 3D is a very sort of progressive process, so if you make sure that the steps that you're doing first are really good, then the longer or the further you go down the process, the easier everything is going to be. Now here inside of Blender, we're going to start creating the vase. So I'm going to delete this cube right here, and I'm going to press Shift A to create a mesh, and we're going to create a cylinder. The units inside of Blender are usually in meters, so this is going to be a super big element, but we're going to be scaling down everything later on. I'm going to press the letter S, and then I'm going to press those letters C to make the little base for our character. So this is going to represent the base that our character is going to be in. Some people like to have fancier bases. I'm just going to keep it like this for now, but later on we're going to be adding just a couple of bevels and stuff to make this base look a little bit nicer. Now, if we go real quick here to Photoshop again, and we think about, let me get my pen, and if we think about the shape of the character, we can see, or we can imagine, that this character is going to have the head, and then the big torso, the legs, or the arms, sorry, the pelvis, and the legs like this. Those are going to be the 5 or 6 main shapes that we're going to have. And there is a very important thing that happens with characters when we're doing 3D stuff, and that is we want to make them look as organic as possible. But at the same time, from a 3D standpoint, since we're going to be using symmetry quite a bit, one of the things that we want is to make sure that everything is aligned to the center, so that later on we can pose it and just create a nicer effect. Now, if we see this from the side, we don't want to have just a straight character going all the way down. We're going to add something called gesture. Gesture is a very important part of the posing and the creation of characters, because it allows us to generate the different lifelike features that can make the element look more dynamic. So for instance, the chest usually is pushing to the back, and the pelvis is usually pushing to the front. And what this will do is it will allow us to create this sort of S-curve around the body that's going to give more dynamism to our character. Now, we're going to do this by utilizing very basic primitives here inside of Blender. So what we're going to do is we're going to press a Shift A, Mesh, and we're going to create a UV sphere. This is going to be the placeholder for our head. I'm going to press G and C, push this up, and then I'm going to press S and make this smaller so that we roughly fit again. If we can think that this is going to be the base of our character, we're going to make the head just an average size for the overall element. Then we're going to press Shift A again, Mesh, Cube, and we're going to bring this cube up with G and Z, and then we're going to press S and a Y to scale this on the Y-axis and make this a little bit more like a rectangle when we see it from the side right here. I'm also going to press S and X to make it a little bit thinner, and then S and C to make it a little bit shorter. And this is going to be my chest. Now, if we go back to what we just mentioned, I'm going to press G and Z again. We just mentioned that the chest is usually pointing or facing back, right, to give us a little bit of gesture. Again, very important to create dynamic looking figures. So we're going to grab this one right here. We're going to press R to rotate, and then X to rotate on the X-axis, and we're going to rotate this slightly back to something like this. This is going to give us a very basic construction for the torso of our character, but it should be more than enough to give us a nice base as we get closer and closer to the high poly section. I'm going to grab this one, and I'm going to press the number 3 on my number pad. If you have a number pad on your keyboard, you can press number 1, 2, and 3 to switch from the different views. I'm going to press number 3, or you can click on this little gizmo over here on this X-axis, and utilize this to, again, move around. So I'm gonna Shift D to duplicate this one, bring it lower, and then rotate it with R to create the other section of the character, which is gonna be sort of like the pelvis right around there. Now this one, of course, is gonna be a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna scale with S, and this is gonna give me the very, very basic shape. I know I might be going a little bit fast right now, but I'm gonna pause in just a second to let you guys get to this point, or we can just keep going. It's up to you. So once we have this, I'm gonna bring another piece, which is gonna be a cylinder. It's gonna be Shift A, and we're gonna be a mesh cylinder, and we're gonna scale the cylinder down, press number 3, and with G, move it all the way to where the neck is supposed to be. Now, this guy does not really have a neck. It's again, like I was mentioning, like the Spy Kids character, that's just like the thumb on the top part. But we're gonna be making the S element right here, just to give it a base that's gonna connect to the rest of the torso. There we go. That looks good. We're then gonna press Shift A again, mesh, and we're gonna bring in one more cylinder. We're gonna S this cylinder to scale it down like this, and then S and Z to scale it up. And if we go to number 1, which is our front view, I can move this to the side and position this where the leg would be, which is right around there. Now he has a lot of ropes, which they're gonna be used to hide a lot of the anatomy on the legs. So we really don't need to worry too much about the this leg right here. Then we're gonna go back to number 1, Shift A to create another element, and we're gonna create a cylinder, and we're gonna bring the cylinder up, and we're gonna scale this in. Probably a little bit less, something like that. And then we're gonna S and Z to scale this up and create this thing right here. We're gonna rotate this as well. And usually when we're creating characters, we either go with a T pose or a B pose, depending on the type of production we're working in. In this case, we're gonna go with a B pose. So it's gonna be like this. Although I do wanna, I'm gonna make this a little bit longer. Then R, and we'll push it right there. There we go. Now, the big question, and this is where I'm going to make a little pause after I'm done with this, is how can we bring these elements into the other side of the character? How can we mirror them? Well, there's a function here inside of Blender that's called the mirror function. It's here on the modifiers. It's this little wrench right here. And if we select the object and we go to the modifiers, we can use the mirror option. We can select the axis, which in this case is the x-axis, and we're going to flip. However, one thing that we need to do is we need to select a mirror object, which is going to be like the point where we're going to be mirroring through, and I'm going to be using the cylinder right there. So we're mirroring through the x-axis using the cylinder as our center point, and as you can see, we get the arm on the other side. Once we're happy with that, we can just click here and hit apply, which is going to make the change permanent, and then we are ready to go. Now with this one right here, with leg, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to go to the modifier. We're going to add a mirror modifier, and we're going to select the little cylinder on the bottom so we can get the leg on the other side. So as you can see, with this done, we've pretty much like created a very, very basic shape for our character that we're going to be able to use as our base mesh to start creating all of the anatomy and the different things that we're going to need for the little golem here. Any questions so far?
For me.
Okay, cool. So the next thing that we need to do, it depends on how much time we want to spend on this first like blocking process. I think we do have enough time to just add a couple of extra elements that are going to be helpful for the overall shape, for instance, like in the stomach. So I'm going to press Shift A, add another mesh, and another cube here. I'm going to press number 1, and I'm going to bring it as close as possible to the center. Now you can see here when I created the next cube, since my 3D cursor is moved out of the place, I accidentally moved it by pressing Shift and right click. It creates the cube where this cursor is. If I want to bring this cursor back, you can press Shift S and then just select cursor to world origin. And now when we create another object, such as this mesh and plane, and we scale this down, we're going to be able to, again, G and C, and push this forward. And this is going to allow me to fill in. I'm going to press S and Y, fill in a little bit of the cavities that we have here, G and Y, to push this block forward, so that when we go into ZBrush and we do something called Dynamesh, we're not gonna have that much of a problem with all of those empty gaps that we have right there. Another thing that we could add from the concept that I'm seeing here, it could be the fingers, but the fingers are actually like short and like stubby, so I think we can definitely make those inside of ZBrush a little bit faster. So let me just check real quick here. Maybe the shoulders could be a good idea over here. If we want to add the shoulders, a good option is to go with a UV sphere again. Go to number 1, a G, move it into position. And this is mainly just to round off again like the corners of the cylinders right there. We're going to add again the modifier. This is going to be the mirror modifier. And this is going to be using the cylinder as well. And there we go. We just hit apply. Now this blocking process is one of my favorite parts of the creation of a figure or any sort of like 3D model, because it allows you to really like visualize how the character is going to look even before you do any sort of stuff. So again, from a production perspective, it's really good to get an idea of the size, the proportions, and the overall look of the character before committing too much time on creating all of the details. But I think we're ready to bring this into ZBrush and start with the creation of the high poly. So we're going to be going back here into Blender at the very end of the whole class to prepare this for the 3D printing process. But for now, I'm just going to grab all of the pieces right here. I'm going to say File, and we're going to say Export. We're going to export this as an FBX. I'm going to save this on the desktop for now. Very important, on the options here of the XBX, we're going to say include selected objects only. We don't want to export any other object or lights or anything. And we're going to call this a Vigilant base mesh. There we go. So we're going to export this FBX. And now we are ready to jump into ZBrush. I'm going to save this file as well on the desktop so we can free some resources, because we're going to be jumping from software to software. There we go. And let's close it for now. Cool. So let me just move my stuff here on my desk. We're going to be working with a tablet here because otherwise we're not going to be able to get the exact same results. However, if you're working with a mouse, it is possible. It's just going to be a little bit more tricky because you need to change the intensity of the brushes a little bit more. There we go. So I'm going to go here to Load Tool, or sorry, Import. We're going to go all the way to our desktop, and we're going to import our Vigilant base mesh. Now, since this is an FBX, something that's going to happen here that I don't like, but that's how ZBrush works, is it's going to actually split every single part of my element into multiple subtools. Again, not ideal, but not bad at all. We're not, it's not something that's going to affect us too much. I'm just going to draw the base mesh right here and press the letter T to go into edit mode. And once we're in edit mode, I'm going to go to the options over here, and there's an option that says Merge Visible under our subtool palette. Have you guys used ZBrush before, by the way? Because otherwise I'm going to have to explain some of the interface as well.
I haven't, no.
You haven't? Okay. Well, would you prefer then if we did the sculpting phase inside of Blender? Because we can also do that. It's not the exact same software, but we can do it.
No, it's fine to use ZBrush, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So we're going to merge visible here. And by merging visible, we're going to be doing this one right here, which is the merge as Z-sphere. Now, here's where the magic's actually going to happen. We're going to go here into the element, and we're going to be using a Dynamesh. Dynamesh is a very, very cool thing inside of ZBrush that changes the way that the polygons work inside of our 3D software. Usually, every single thing that we did inside of Blender is made out of polygons, squares and triangles that build up the topology and create this really, really interesting construction. However, the problem with this types of the problem with this topology is the fact that we're not going to be able to edit this in a nice way. So to go over that, or to adapt to that thing, ZBrush has this tool called Dynamesh that allows us to transform the forms that we have into this new reconstructed matrix of polygons and triangles that will give us way more like sculpting power, if we can say it that way. So by doing this, as you can see, every single piece of our character got merged into a single object, and all of the topology, the amount of polygons that we have, has changed as well. So once we have this, we are ready to start using our first brush, which is going to be the move brush, to start creating the just basic shapes of the element. So give me just 1 second here. There we go. So the way we're going to work with this or do this is we're going to use a shortcut, which is a V for brush, M for move, and then V. The move brush is a really powerful brush that allows us to move things around and pretty much modify the form of our element. And whenever we're working with sculpting, this is very important, we always want to work from the big aspects of our characters all the way to the smaller aspects. People sometimes get impatient when doing characters, and they want to go to like the details, like the wrinkles and the pores and stuff like that. And it is important. That's a very cool part of the process. But if we don't have the form like properly laid out, it becomes really difficult to get a nice result. There's a question that we have here on the other chat that says, it's control left drag to Dynamesh. Yes, once we have any change on the model, if we want to retry or reactivate Dynamesh, we can just control and drag to do this effect right here. So once we have this, the next step is we need to start modifying this element or moving the clay around to create the shape of our golem. So I'm gonna bring this guy over here. This is Pure Ref, by the way, very cool software. This is free to keep your reference. Super handy when painting or sculpting or doing anything pretty much. And yeah, we're gonna start using our move brush to start giving this the shape that we would like the character to have. So for instance, the head, I can see that the hair is a little bit more like a cone. So I'm gonna start pushing and pulling all of these elements to generate the cone-like shape. If I want to fill in these gaps right here, I'm gonna use another brush, which is the clay buildup. The shortcut is B for brush, C for clay, and then B for buildup. And by doing that, I can start filling in those gaps right there. And again, by pressing Control and dragging outside, we're gonna be filling that in. And as you can see, the mass starts looking a little bit better. Let's go back to V and a V, which is the move brush. And what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna start pushing and pulling the forms of the arm. So usually the arm has a very big muscle here on the top, which is the deltoid. And then this whole thing, like from the center of the arm forward, that's where the forearm is gonna be. So I'm gonna start pushing the forearm forward, making sure that I leave a little space there for the elbow. And the forearm is really fun. This is something that took me quite a bit to learn when I was a student. But the shape of the forearm, let me create a new layer here. If we check the silhouette of the arm, we have a big sphere on the top, which is the deltoid muscle. And then we have a block, which is going to be our bicep and tricep. And then the forearm is going to create a sort of like arrow thing going from the elbow towards the wrist, like this. And the interesting thing about this is when you see the arm sideways, this would be like a front side or a front view of the arm. When you see the arm from a side view, what's going to happen is you're still going to have this sort of like a round shape for the deltoid. But then instead of having a flat area here on the bicep and tricep, the flat area is going to be on the forearm. It's going to be like this, okay, again, like an arrow. And the thing that are going to be creating the volume is going to be the bicep and the tricep over here. Those are the muscles that are going to be changing the forms. In our character, we don't see that much on this concept, but there's a newer concept right here where we definitely see this. We can see as well that the forms are a lot chunkier. So it's just a matter of, again, using our move brush here to start creating the volume and giving them the sort of like chunkiness that we want to have. We're going to work with anatomy in a little while, so there's no need. A very common mistake again is people tend to rush to the details or to the secondary forms, and we always need to be very careful about the initial construction of our element. So look at that, we already have a really nice form right here. without having to spend too much time. We did a very quick base form inside of Blender, and now with this we get a nice arm form appearing. Now, torso wise, male torsos are usually very broad on the top part of the character, and they continue on the sides as well with the hip bones. So I'm gonna go with BCB, which is gonna add a little bit of volume right here. BCB is the clay buildup, and we're just gonna start filling in all of this area right here. So we're pretty much rounding off all of the sharp corners that we have with the character. On the back, you can already see that this back is really flat. So usually when we see a character from the back, here's another little diagram. When we see a traditional like human character from the back, we're gonna see the neck and then the torso. And we're gonna have this sort of curvature going around, and then it pushes in towards the lower back, and then it pushes back out on the butt area. For this character, I would expect something like that, even though we don't have an image from the backside of the character. I would definitely expect something similar happening. So we definitely need to fill a little bit more volume on this part, because right now it's very flat. So with clay buildup again, BCB, we're just gonna start adding all of this volume into the character. There we go. And by doing this, we get a very nice result, or we start getting a nicer result on the back of the character. There we go. Now the same thing can be done on the front of the character. As you can see, there's absolutely no chest right now. And again, usually it depends on the type of character, but you're usually gonna have the head, the neck, and then since the chest is going to be pushing forward, you're going to get quite a bit of volume on this part right here. Right now we just have a flat area, so we definitely need to add a little bit of volume indicating the chest muscles and the areas that we would expect to see right here. Not too worried, because he's got this big robe that we're going to be doing later on, so I'm not too worried about the anatomy precision that we're going to have for this particular character, but we still want to have a nice silhouette over there. So when we see it from the side, I can again use our move brush, and usually with superheroes you tend to like really puff out the chest to go into this very heroic pose. So that's what we're gonna do right there. Now the head, I'm gonna make it a little bit longer here and give it a little bit more of a nice flat top right there, again to match the concept as nice as possible. If you want, we're going to be doing this later, but if you want, we can add just like the eyes. If we dynamesh again, we can add a quick indication of where the eyes are going to be, and that's going to give us a general idea, a rough idea of how the character is going to be built. Let's go back to our move brush, and let's keep cleaning some of this stuff up. So for instance, on the hands, as you see here on the concept, very short fingers, right? So I'm going to use my move brush with a small size. We can press a spacebar to go into the sizes, and we can make this really small and just pull this out to create one finger. So we'll just push this one out. Usually the palms of the characters are facing towards the character, like here in the concept. So this will be like the left thumb, and he has 5 fingers. So we're gonna do 1, 2, that would be the middle finger, which is usually a little bit longer, and then 3, and then 4. The pinky finger is usually a little bit like back on the hand. When we see diagrams of the hand, the pinky finger is usually situated a little bit lower than the rest of the fingers. But again, since this is a golem, we can take some artistic liberties and modify it to something that looks a little bit nicer. There we go. Again, control and drag outside of the character, and as you can see, that's going to clean up the hands and give us a really nice base mesh to start polishing. Let's go to the lower back, which is again very empty. So I'm going to grab again my clay buildup, BCB, and we're going to start filling this with more volume, more mass here on the sculpture. The little butt right there. Again, no need to go into details or anything, but we should just add the general shape, and that's it. Now for the feet, the only reference I was able to find was this one, where you can see the feet is like a big stump as well. So I'm going to use my move brush, bring the feet out a little bit, and just create like a flared sort of effect on the bottom part to indicate that that's the base of the character. I would expect to see some sort of like knee or something. So I'm also gonna just like push the leg forward a little bit. Same for the elements right there. And there we go. We feel the lower abdomen. And as you can see, this already gives us a nice like like base mesh for our character. One thing that I'm noticing is that we might have a little bit of an issue here with the armpits, because the arms are really low. So usually we would like that to be not as intense. I'm gonna use BCB real quick here on the hands to just like scrape. By pressing Alt, we go into the negative section of the tool, and by doing this, we can carve in a little bit of the volume, or carve out a little bit of the volume from the character. And there we go. Now, to separate the arms a little bit more, I'm gonna press Control, and on the top area right here, which is where the brushes are, I'm gonna select something called the mask lasso. So over here, Control, click, and we're gonna select this mask lasso right here, and we're gonna mask out the arms. What this will allow me to do now is press Control and click outside of the object to invert the mask. And then with W, I can access this thing, which is called the gizmo, and we can unlock it, move the gizmo to where the shoulder is, lock it again, and then just rotate the arms a little bit. That will give me more space. And again, armpits are usually a tricky area to work with, so that will give me a little bit more space, and this should allow me to clean that area a little bit better. We definitely need to do another Dynamesh right there. And now with a V, C, and V, we can start carving out a little bit of the space there on the armpits. There we go. Now we just, I think the chest is a little bit too puffy, so I'm going to use BMB again to just bring the chest back a little bit. And I'm going to push the head forward a little bit as well. Just a couple of changes there. Proportion is really, really important. I'm going to show you here a trick to check your proportions and make sure that things are looking as nice as possible. So I'm going to copy one of these images, and there we go. And what we can do, I know this image is like a picture, so it might not be as precise. Let's Control Team. Oh, for some reason it's not letting me move it. Let me try that again. Copy. Huh, that's really weird. I'm not sure why that's happening. Anyway, so if we just take this picture right here, I'm gonna do it like side by side right here. And we draw some lines. Just imagine that these lines are going towards the character. We can see the size of the head, which is right around this cube. And if we count how many heads we have, we got 1, 2, 3. We got like 4 heads right here on the torso. And then the legs are a little bit longer. Again, it could be due to a little bit of perspective. But one thing that we can do here to make this guy look a little bit more heroic is we can push the legs up a little bit like this. So by making the legs look a little bit longer, they're going to stylize the character a little bit more and give us a slightly different result. This is something that people do very, very frequently with things like dolls. So if you guys have seen any Barbie doll, the legs, the proportions of the legs are really, really long, but it really helps stylize the figure. So now that we have this, we can start working on one of my favorite parts of the character, which is anatomy. We can go over some of the big anatomy pieces of this character and start creating a more like clean up version of the element. The way we're going to do this is as follows. we are first of all gonna increase the resolution of our Dynamesh, because we talked about this before, right? This is the current amount of polygons that we have, which is the current amount of elements that we can use. This is pretty much like pixels, right? Like the resolution of pixels on the screen. So the more pixels we have, the higher resolution the image is going to be. Well, the higher polygons or poly count we have, the more details we're going to be able to add. And right now we're only at 20,000 points, which is, it's a good number, but it's not good enough to do really intricate details for the character. By the way, to the guys that are watching on the stream, remember you can ask some questions on the chat as well, and I'll be happy to help as well. So once we have this, if we go to Dynamesh, we can bring the resolution up like to 300 or something. And when we do control and drag, we're going to be able to have, look at this, 127,000 points. So we went 5 times or 6 times more than we had before. And then now, as you can see, the size of these little squares that make up our character are way bigger. Now you can see that the character has all of these weird colors. These weird colors are called polygroups, and the polygroups are a way in which we can separate our object. Right now, the reason why we have these colors is due to the original polygons that we used to create the character, so the cylinders and the cubes. It sort of remembers where this polygons are coming from. We really don't need it so far, so I'm just going to press Ctrl and W to simplify this into a very simple single polygroup. Now let's start with the anatomy, and I think I really like the concept piece for this year's event. So we're gonna do the anatomy for the arm. Again, we're gonna press B, C, and V to go into our clay buildup, and we can start building up the muscles that we have right here. So the first muscle that we usually have is, of course, the shoulder muscle. And the shoulder muscle is called the deltoid. It comes from the Greek, that means a shield. It has this sort of shield shape. It's made out of 3 main heads, or 3 main components. We got the middle one, the side one, or the back one, and the front one. And all of these 3 heads, they start very big here on the center of the character, and they start getting slimmer and slimmer, and they get into this sort of pointy end as they go to the middle of the arm, right around there. So as you can see, the technique here is I'm using my clay buildup to create these streaks of elements, or streaks of volume, to give more volume to our element or to our character. We got a question that says, is this the workflow of character modeling? Yes, this is one of the workflows that we can use to create characters. Actually, if you're doing characters for video games or for movies or commercials, this process is very similar. Once we finish the high poly, that's where the process starts to sort of shift or move away into different tools. So for games, we will need to optimize them using bakes. For films, we will need to do displacement maps. For commercials, you also need displacement maps, and for 3D printing, you actually don't need anything. You just need the 3D sculpt, which is why this is so much easier to do. Now I'm gonna go back to my BCB, and actually I'm gonna show you another brush right now, which is the Damien Standard. Is BDS is the shortcut for this brush, and this brush allows us to carve into the element. So I'm gonna use this to carve where the bicep would be. The biceps are really, I think it's probably one of the famous, or the most famous muscle. Pretty much everyone knows where the bicep is. So I'm gonna just create the section or the area where the bicep is. What people don't usually know about the bicep is that it's not as inflated as we usually see in bodybuilders and stuff. It's actually a very elongated muscle. So I am gonna add a little bit of volume right here to the bicep to make it slightly bigger, with clay buildup again, as you can see here from the side view. But from the front view, we actually want to eliminate some of this volume right here, because again, when we see the arm from the front, as what we had in this other diagram, when we see the arm from the front, oh, there we go, this part right here where the bicep and the tricep are, it usually looks thinner than the forearm. So I want to remove a little bit of the volume on the top and the bottom, so that this looks a little bit smoother. I'm gonna carve in here a little bit more of the deltoid, and this is gonna allow me to make the character look a lot stronger as well. There we go. So we're just gonna keep carving here There we go. As you can see, the arm is shaping up very nicely right there. And we're gonna go to the back part right here, and we're gonna go with the tricep now. The tricep has 3 heads, but we're just gonna draw 2 because the third head is actually hidden. So we're not gonna be seeing it. And the first one's gonna be right here. The second one's gonna be right here. They're a little bit higher than the bicep. You can see the biceps volume is right here. The tricep volume is gonna be a little bit higher, right around here. And both of these heads, plus the third head, they're gonna create a very, very big and strong tendon going to this part right here, to the elbow. So I'm gonna use my, this is another brush. It's called Train Dynamic. The shortcut is B, T, and D. And we're gonna use this brush to create the nice transition right there. We got a question from Wacker the Maker. Says, what's the difference between Keyshot and Substance Painter? Do they have their own pros and cons? Yeah, they're actually quite different. So Substance Painter is for texturing, Keyshot is for rendering. I do believe you can texture inside of Keyshot, but it's more like preset materials and stuff. I'm not sure if you can like texture with the same amount of control as what you can do inside of Substance Painter. Any book for learning anatomy? Yes, there's 2 books that I strongly recommend for anyone wanting to learn anatomy. These are the ones that I used when I was a student. So the first one is George Bridgman. Constructive Anatomy. This is really, really, really good. You might be able to find this like open source because it's a very, very old book, but it's usually quite cheap as well. So George Bridgman, Constructive Anatomy, it's a really, really good one. I really like this one to learn about the flow of the character, and he has a very sort of like hard chiseled look for the figures, which I personally use quite a bit on my creations. However, if you want to go for something a little bit more like soft, there's another great author called Bern Hogarth. Bern Hogarth Anatomy. His book's name Dynamic Anatomy, and this is the sort of stuff that he teaches about like the muscles and stuff. As you can see, he's more like a little bit more like a curved sort of inflated anatomy. I like to compare the two like to Corvettes and Mustangs. So for me, Bridgman is like the Mustang, like this like muscle car, and then Bern Hogarth's like that Corvette, this sort of like slick, like fast anatomy that you want to have. So these 2 are really, really, really good. I personally like the diagrams that Bern Hogarth has because it breaks down all of the anatomy into this like planes that are easy to understand for a sculpture. So yeah, those will be my go-to anatomy resources. So going back here to the character, we're gonna be adding now the muscles that go towards the hand. Now, one of the cool things or interesting things about this character right here is you can see that the forearm is more like a block of stone, right? So we really don't need to be too mindful about the anatomy of the forearm, which can be quite tricky. I'm just gonna add a little bit of volume here and make this sort of like this big chunky cylinders for the character. There we go. Yesterday I was playing with my party. They were facing their first dragon. They faced an adult white dragon, and it was a quite fun fight. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna introduce this character in our campaign, but it will be an interesting thing. There we go. So chunky arms right here. And then we got the fingers. So let's just do a little fix on the fingers here. Fingers I usually leave until the very last part of the high poly process, because fingers can be you need quite a bit of anatomy or anatomy topology to be able to get them really, really nicely. So there we go. Now on the hand, I do want to add like the basic pads that we have on the hands. So usually we have 3 main pads. One on the, let's go to the diagram here. So when we do a hand, we can draw it like a box. Actually, the easiest way to draw a hand is like those fingerless gloves. You just draw like the fingerless shape right here, and then here's where you're gonna have your thumb, and all of the rest of the fingers are gonna be coming forward like this. That's the basic like construction of a hand. But the important thing about the pads of the hand is that we're usually gonna have one pad here on the thumb area. We're gonna have a smaller pad on the pinky finger, and then we're gonna have one pad for each finger that pretty much combines into a single one on the top part of the hand right there. So those are the three things that we can do here. And again, this dude's like a stone guy, so we don't need to make him super organic, but just indicating this sort of things, they allow us to create something called a verisimilitude, I believe is the word, where you do things that make elements or characters appear to be real. So it's not really that we want to make them perfectly real, we just want to make them appear as real as possible. So there we go. Now, another thing that we need to take into account is the size at which we're going to be printing this guy, right? Because even though right now we can really zoom into the fingers, once we do the 3D print, he might be really, really small. So there's a lot of details that we might be inclined to do right now, but depending on the scale, they might not be even worth it. Let's now go to the chest area, because the chest area definitely needs a little bit of work. And even though he's going to have the ropes later on, I do want to add a little bit of the muscles that we normally have here. And the main muscle, of course, is the pectoral muscle. So this is a very, very chunky, another one of the famous muscles that we have. It's going to be right around here. And again, on the style of what's the word, of George Bridgman, I like to use trim dynamic, which is a BTD, to sharpen up the planes of the muscles and create this more like a faceted character effect. Later on, if we need to soften this up, we can just add more volume and stuff, but that's usually how I like to create my characters. On the back part, we're definitely missing a little bit of back muscle, so I'm going to use, again, clay buildup to add a little bit of back muscle on this area right here. We're just going to keep going on this part and just adding all of this volume. There we go. Kind of reminds me of the thing from Fantastic Four. Although that one would be a lot more complicated because each stone is like an individual stone or something. There we go. So as you can see, that change that we did right there, let me back up so that you can see how different the profile of the character looks just by adding that line right there that bridges the neck and the head. That's the kind of stuff that we need to look for when we're doing anatomy. One of the secrets about anatomy is not only the things that you see, like the muscles and the fibers and the volumes. It's also the things that you don't see, such as the silhouette and the shapes and the negative space that you get on the characters. So that sort of stuff really, really helps out bridge the sort of like effect that we want to do. I'm gonna go clay build up again. And there's a very, very, very important muscle that's coming from the back of our characters. And this back muscle goes all the way to the front. And it goes towards the chest area, which is this one right here. And it's called the latissimus dorsi. It actually goes to the arm. But when you see it from the front, I like to call it like the bat wing, because it looks like the membrane that you would sometimes find on bats. So it's this sort of like membrane right there. And another very important part of the torso of the front part of the character is the rib cage. So the rib is going to be going from the center of the pectoral muscles down and back into the back of the character. Now that's way too much, so I'm going to use my trim dynamic to sharpen this area. And as you can see, it's kind of like chiseling out the different parts of the character. We're slowly building up the volumes and the forms that we need to create the high points and the low points of our anatomy. Anatomy can be tricky. People sometimes get caught up in the terminology, in the names of the muscles and things like that. But it's more about understanding the forms. And the forms, this is a very, very important thing that we all should know. There's like 4 or 5 main forms. We got spheres, we got cylinders, we got cubes, and we got like prisms. Those are like the main shapes that you can have. Every single muscle that you can imagine can be simplified into one of the shapes right here. So for instance, the pectoral muscle, as you can see, we have like a box, right? So we can see the different facets or faces of the box right here. And by understanding where those planes are and where they like change in shape, we're gonna be able to create something that looks really, really cool. I think I'm gonna make the deltoids a little bit bigger. Same for the arms, just a little bit chunkier. And I'm using my move brush here to give more volume to the character, to make him look a little bit more stylized. So something like that works. Now here on the hip area, we're gonna have the latissimus, no, not the latissimus dorsi, so the obliques going towards the belly. We're gonna have the belly, and then we're gonna have the hip area and the legs. Now again, this character has a big rope, so I don't really think it's worth it to spend time on the anatomy of the legs. Maybe the only thing I would like to do is just place where the knees would be, in case we need to understand or we need to do some bending or something later on for posing. So just like very quickly describing where the knees would be should be more than enough. Now here again, we can ask ourselves, are we matching the perspective? Are we matching, or not the perspective, the proportions? Are we matching the proportions of our character? And I think so far we're quite close. The arms do look a little bit longer, so I'm gonna use my move brush and just move the arms lower. And if I need to move the hands lower as well, just make the arms slightly longer. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I would imagine, again, I can't really tell on the concept, but I would imagine he has a little bit of a chin. So first I'm gonna carve in a little bit more on the eyes right there. I'm gonna create a little bit of a chin here, like just a small cut there, so that we can kind of see that there's a separation between the head and everything else. I'm gonna use again my Damien standard and start carving in through the back of the head to separate it from the rest of the body. And then if we take a look at the head, you can see that there's some important angles on the top. So I'm gonna use my move brush, push this forward, and then just trim dynamic to flatten this. BTD is the shortcut for trim dynamic, and it's a really strong brush that allows us to generate a nice sort of like faceted look for the character. Let's use our move brush here to give the head a little bit more of this sort of shape. And there we go. I'm gonna use Damien standard to separate the armpits a little bit more there, to really indicate that the muscle, the latissimus dorsi, is actually coming from the back. And that's it. Now this robe is a little bit of an open robe, so we might see a little bit of the anatomy there. And there's one of my favorite muscles that we have here on the side of the character. This is called the serratus anterior, which is kind of like a saw blade. It's what we'll call serratus. You're gonna see like small little fingers. Boxers, it's very obvious on boxers, but we can make this guy really strong as well. So I'm just gonna add this sort of like little fingers here on the side. And that's another muscle that really like brings the whole piece together. It kind of reminds me of like the Gears of War characters. They're very chunky, and they get this sort of like heroic, almost godlike proportions. There we go. Cool. So quite a bit of a change, right, from what we had right here, which was just our very basic base mesh. And as we start adding and removing volume, pushing things around, using a little bit of the knowledge that we have from anatomy, we can really bring this into the next level right here. So with this done, I think we're ready to start jumping onto some other parts of the character. I do want to modify the deltoids there a little bit, just make them a little bit rounder. Maybe bring the head a little bit higher as well. There we go. Let's push. This is all being done with the move brush. The move brush is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have, not only in this software, like any sculpting software will have something like this. And the move brush is just super powerful to adjust proportions pretty much on the fly. There we go. Not bad. I'm gonna use a little bit of clay buildup here to fill in the gaps on the cheeks, because it seems like we lost a little bit of volume there. And there we go. Cool. So now that we have the base anatomy, there are like multiple ways in which we can follow along with the rest of the character. The first one would be to continue working on the details with the rock stuff, right? Like make this thing look like it's actually made out of rock and not just like clay. And I think that's what we're going to be doing. But another option would be to jump and do the ropes. Now the ropes are a little bit more complicated. I'm going to be showing you some methods as we approach the accessory side of things. There's also like the belt buckles and the belt itself that we need to model, probably traditionally model inside of Blender. We got a question over here that says, do we retopologize first or pose first? Do we need to rig the character? You don't need to rig the character if you're going to be doing 3D printing, because once you 3D printed, like that's it, it's a solid object. In regards to retopologizing or posing, I would probably, again, for 3D printing, I would just do as much as I can symmetrically, and once there's nothing else we can do, I would jump and do this, I would jump in and do the pose, but you don't need to retopologize. Okay, so for the details, to start getting into the details and into the different, like all of the bands that we have right here, the runes and stuff, we definitely need more topology. Because right now, again, we're working with 127,000 points, which might seem like a lot, but it's very, very easy to know when we need more topology. Let's say, for instance, we want to add one of these lines on the arm. If I go Damien Standard, and I try to draw one line down the arm, one small line, you can see that it looks very, very pixelated, and that's not what we want. Nowadays, 3D printers have a lot of resolution, so we should be able to really bring this into a really high level. So I'm going to go to Dynamesh, and I'm going to increase this quite a bit to like 1200 or something, and we're going to Dynamesh. As you can see, we're now all the way to 1.9 million polygons, and that should be more than enough to start working on some of the more like specific details that we have right here. So for instance, I can see that there's a line that goes right around here. See that? So now that we have way more topology, we can definitely push the amount of detail that we can get from the character, and we can start doing this sort of stuff. Very, very cool. So let's just keep drawing here. There we go. And we're just going to do this all the way around with our Damien Standard. We have symmetry turned on, so it should be happening on the other side as well. And that already is going to give us a really nice detail. I can see another block right there. So the hand seems to be divided into like 3 sections. So one section is going to be right around here, and then the other section is going to be right around here. So let's just start drawing all of this right here. And we're just going to keep drawing all the way around. There we go. Remember, guys, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Just any questions about the technical things, about softwares, I'm here to help you out. So we're just going to keep drawing this all the way to around the arm. All the way around. And we're going to be bringing this all the way to the other side. There we go. So look at that. Not bad, right? Not freaking bad. We're going to be drawing this. I'm going to go over this again with the Damien Standard. This is going to push this a little bit more. I'm trying to see if we have any other questions over here. Mr. Ajesh was saying hi, teacher, a little while ago. What's up, my friend? Let's do Trim Dynamic now. And we're going to use Trim Dynamic to start creating all of these things right here. We're going to start cleaning all of this area. Later on, we're going to add this a rock texture to make this look like rock. But right now, the cleaner we can keep this, the better. So I'm going to be using all of this Trim Dynamic to start like removing some of this effects right here. Now I can see that on the bicep itself, we also have another cut going down the middle. So I'm going to bring my Damien Standard again, and I'm going to start cutting right down the middle of the bicep. Now here's one very, very important advice about 3D printing. 3D printing will always lose a little bit of detail because when we 3D print, especially using resin printers, the light that that generates the 3D print or that hardens the resin, it will have a little bit of bleed. So a very good advice that I was given is to always carve things a little bit more than you would normally do, because if you keep things very subtle here on the sculpting phase, on this details, then you might lose quite a bit of the information once you 3D print. Now, I really like what they did right here on the concept where the bicep looks a little bit more bulgy. So I'm going to start adding a little bit of more volume and removing volume from underneath the bicep right here to make the bicep pop a little bit more. I like to use this sort of like going around motion to just add volume in a very organic, non-destructive way. And this really helps like sell the fact that this is a little bit more organic than mechanic. And then if we want to push this even further, this is where we can add a little bit of Damien Standard and create some wrinkles around the main bicep of the shape. Okay, so something like this. Same thing up here, like on where this thing meets the deltoid, we can add like a couple of like big strokes with our Damien Standard to really push this. Now, this is something that usually doesn't happen. See how ugly the shape of my bicep is? We want to have this sort of like round shape over here. So I'm going to use my move brush. I'm going to start pushing the center of the bicep out a little bit more. And then the top of the bicep, I'm going to push in as well to generate a slightly different effect. Now, when we see it from the side, you can see that the bicep is looking a little bit better. Doesn't mean that we can't go here with trim dynamic and just like flatten a little bit of the muscle again, even if that means erasing the line. This is very, very common on the creative side of things. We will have to go over and redo certain things every now and then for the sake of our pieces, right? People sometimes are really scared about backtracking and having to do everything once again, but it's perfectly fine. You can see even the old masters of like the Renaissance did this. There's been studies about like old paintings where they use X-ray and they can see all of the previous sketches and previous like tries that people did on the paintings. Probably not something that you could do on traditional sculpting, because once you destroy the marble, then you're out of luck. But for other stuff like backtracking and just fixing things that are not working, it's perfectly fine. There we go. So that gives us a really nice effect. We're gonna be adding cracks and everything else a little bit later, but as you can see, this is giving us a really cool sort of like kind of looks like a column, right? Like a column that we are using to build up the character. I would expect there to be another line on the deltoid, to be honest. We might be covering most of this line with the ropes. But from a design perspective, I would expect the arm to be another sort of like section right here. Now, as you can see, I'm not being very careful about the line. And this is to give it this sort of like organic, handcrafted look rather than machined. So it looks like an old wizard built this a long time ago. There we go. Cool. So that's it for the arms. Again, we always need to focus, and this is again very important from a production standpoint. We should always focus on the things that we're going to be seeing the most. It makes no sense, or it would make no sense for me to start spending time on this part of the character, like on the abdomen, on the inner chest, because all of this is going to be covered by the ropes, right? So again, not really worth it. However, this part right here that we do see a little bit of the chest, it might not be a bad idea to spend a little bit of time there just detailing and adding this sort of like cuts in there, so that when we see that part through the ropes, people can be like, oh, look at this, that's some good attention to detail that we're trying to convey here. And then you can see some major cuts as well, like there's one right around there. We can add it already. Well, we're going to be adding more cracks again later on. There we go. I'm gonna go to the elbow, and I'm gonna just add a little bit more of an elbow shape, because right now it was looking a little bit weird. So I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit cleaner like this. There we go. And by doing this, we can start filling all of this area. And again, as long as the arm looks like it's following the usual anatomy, this should look quite nice. I'm gonna use my move brush here to make this part of the armor a little bit chunkier. And another thing is very, very important is always look at your element from different parts or from different views. This is very, very, very important. Because from like when we do concept art is really cool because you only need to do one like picture, and that's usually it, right? That's the main thing. But with 3D art, you don't know where your audience is gonna be like looking at your sculpture from, like the angle or the perspective. So that's why you need to be very, very careful to always make everything as nice as possible for your characters. There we go. There we go. Cool. Let's go to the head now. I think the arms are looking quite nice for what we have. And we're gonna be again adding more of this sort of like rock and crack texture later on. Let's go now to the face. So let's bring the face right here. And the first thing I want to like modify or change a little bit are the eyes, because right now my eyes look very like soft, and I would like them to look a little bit more like hard surfacey. So I'm going to start with clay buildup, and I'm going to start adding like a border on the outer edge of the eyes right there. And then with trim dynamic, I'm going to start flattening that border on the outside, and as you can see, that keeps me, or should give me, a very, very nice like control edge on the inside. There we go. Now, very, very common trick here inside of ZBrush, very similar to what we did with Blender like an hour ago. We're gonna add the eyes, right? So we do. I do think. Well, that's a question actually. I'm not sure if he has like some like globes or if it's just like carved stone. It could be both. I think we're gonna go for an eyes. I think we're gonna go for just like some like nice round eyes on the center. So I'm gonna say append, and we're gonna append a sphere. We're gonna select the sphere here from the subtools, which are extra things that we're gonna have. And if we press W, we can scale this down and position this as a single eye on the eye socket on the top. So we're gonna have this one right here. We're gonna do that one right there. And there we go. Probably a little bit smaller. Probably gonna push it a little bit farther out. There we go. And now that we have this, we can go C plugin and we can say subtool master and mirror. And by mirroring this, we're gonna bring that eye to the other side. Now, just to make him a little bit more human, I'm gonna add some eyelids right here. And the cool thing is, when we have extra objects, such as this sphere, every single object that we add as an extra object is gonna act as a mask. So as you can see, when I'm creating the eyelids right here, they go around the sphere, allowing me to create something that looks really, really interesting. We got a hey from Edgar Castillo here on the other chat. How are you, my friend? Welcome. Welcome to this super long stream that we're going to be doing. What are we? We're like 1 hour in, I think. There we go. Let's add a couple more stuff right here. And that's it. Now, the head is one of the most important parts of any character, right? So, since this is one of the most important parts, I am going to go to my Damien standard and I'm going to break symmetry. So, I'm going to press X on the keyboard to break symmetry so that we can start changing the way this looks. So, in this case, I'm going to be able to create a line going to the other eye like this, like a crack line, following this lines over here. And then from the side of this eye, we got another crack going down here. Another line going up like this. Another one going back. There we go. And we're gonna keep going to create this sort of like fragmented look here. I'm gonna try to go for more like, what's the word? We're gonna try to go for more like faceted looks. Yeah, Edgar, we're going, this is gonna be a 4-hour stream, so we're gonna be finishing at 1 a.m. My local time. And you guys are welcome to ask any questions. And we're gonna go over here to another cut right here. There we go. And we just can keep going here. And as you can see, that's gonna give us this sort of like faceted look. I actually don't love this one because it kind of looks like a smile. One of the things that I don't like to do, especially with constructs like this, is I don't want to like project any sort of like feeling onto them if it's not needed. So I'm gonna be using a little bit of train dynamic here to clean some of these effects, and that way we're not again projecting any type of feeling, and he looks a little bit more detached from the normal feels. There we go. Let's go over here. Yes, we're gonna be using the alpha for rocks, Edgar, a little bit later. But right now, I just want to do the basic like cuts, and then we'll use the alpha. There we go. We just keep going right here, and we keep adding like this. Again, let's use Stream Dynamic to clean a little bit of this rocks right there. And there you go. That looks really nice. Really, really nice. Now, I'm going to use my Trim Dynamic to clean a little bit of the brush strokes that I had on some of the muscles here on the shoulders. So all of this area, this is very important. And actually, I think this is one very, very common mistake that students make. Like junior sculptors. They will not do cleanup. They will not do polish. They'll just get some interesting texture and they will try to roll with it. So it's very, very important to take the time and actually clean up stuff to get a better result on your elements. Now, a small little problem here. I just forgot to activate Trim Dynamics, so things are gonna be a little bit asymmetrical. Again, not that big of a deal. Actually, asymmetry is another one of those things that people are really scared of, and when they shouldn't. It's really not that big of a deal. Although I understand, like for more complex characters, I understand why asymmetry could be considered problematic sometimes. I'm gonna add a little bit more volume here on the tricep, and we're just gonna keep adding more stuff over here. There we go. So someone on the chat just mentioned, Edgar just mentioned about alphas. What are alphas? Well, alphas are one thing that we can use to save ourselves a lot of time and to create a detail that will be really difficult to create on our own, okay? And there is a person who actually created several alphas and several brushes that are really, really, really good, especially for this character. Like, I think they were ideally made for this character. And this person is, oh, actually, I always forget about his name, but I'll show you guys where you can find them. If you look for orb brushes, Michael Cuevas, I think is his name. If you look for orb brushes, this guy has its own, Michael Vicente. Michael Vicente? There we go, Michael Vicente. So this orb brushes, these are a preset of brushes that you can get for free out of Gumroad. These are really, really, really good to create a rock detail. So I actually already downloaded these ones, and we're going to be using them right now to add a little bit more detail to our character right here. So the brushes, I installed them here inside of my lightbox, and then brush, and I got my orb brushes right here. And this is the one that I want to use. I want to use this orb rock details too. So I'm just going to double click this one. And the way this works is you literally just drag and drop this on top of the character. And if we increase the intensity, you can see that we get this very, very cool, like faceted look. You can press Alt to remove volume. But this is a super, super quick way, as you can see right there, to get this sort of like grunge and stony effect with the character. Now, just be careful. Make sure that when you're using this, you're rotating the alpha a little bit, because otherwise it looks very obvious that we're using an alpha. And also try not to make this like super aggressive, because it can like modify or twist your volumes quite a bit, and it can get a slightly like weird result. As you can see, this is starting to look a little bit more like chip rocked, which could be fine, right? Like this could perfectly be fine, but if I don't want to have as much, we can just lower the intensity. For instance, here on the face, I'm gonna actually remove symmetry, so the face is a little bit more asymmetrical, and you can see how nice this is starting to look, right? Like this again, like this chip rocked that we're adding to the whole character. So let's bring this intensity down a little bit up. Yeah, spray mode works well for veins as well. Yeah, that's a good solution too. The one thing I don't like about alphas is that they can make things a little bit too noisy. So after I do this sort of like alpha pass that I just did, one thing that I'm gonna do as well is I'm gonna bring back, or I'm gonna go with trim dynamic, and I'm gonna try to clean up a little bit of the elements as well. Okay, because otherwise, if we just let the alphas do all the work, then we're doing something wrong. Also, keep in mind that these alphas are a sort of soft effect or soft detail. So as I was mentioning earlier, when we 3D print this thing, a lot of this thing could be lost on the 3D printer. It depends on which kind of 3D printer you have. We'll talk about the 3D printers on the last portion of this class. But yeah. So as you can see here with Trim Dynamic, I'm gonna be polishing some of the muscles as well, to bring back or to clean up some of the surfaces and make this not like so spiky, right? So this is a really interesting concept. I actually learned this concept from a really talented 3D artist. His name is Furio Tedeschi. He's like a master at like hard surface stuff. So Furio Tedeschi. And Furio Tedeschi has done this sort of like super complex sci-fi things. I think he's Russian. He's got a couple of tutorials as well, really cool. I strongly recommend it. If you want to be like hard surface stuff, like this is the dude. And he mentions a concept that's really interesting when he designs his creatures, where he mentions that there needs to be some rest areas, okay? So when you're designing anything or sculpting anything, you can't just like sculpt and hope to have details in every single place. It is important that you leave certain areas that are a little bit smoother, that they don't have any grain or detail, because this allows the eye of the audience or whoever is watching your piece to have a little bit of a rest moment and appreciate the rest of the elements. So this is an excellent example. I'm not sure if this is, it does seem to be from Furio Tedeschi. So as you can see, it's very busy. This bumblebee is very busy on the face and over here, but all of this parts right here, very clean, right? Very simple, very simplified. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going for, so that we can let the audience have a moment to rest and appreciate every single part of the model. Okay, so rest areas are super important, and that's why I'm using my trim dynamic to clean a couple of these areas and make sure that we have some big like chunks of stone, just like creating the general forms of our character. So all of this right here, that's what we're going for. There we go. There we go. Not bad, right? Again, just take a look at where we started. What, like 1.5 hours ago? Yeah, 1.5 hours ago, and look at where we're at. So this is the fun thing about 3D and about sculpting. If you understand like this basic propositions that I've been talking about and these basic tools, we can get to a really nice level in very simple time. And again, literally, I'm gonna try to print this guy tonight and see if we can have it ready for tomorrow's session. And if I can have it ready, I'll show it to you guys. But we could have this ready for a game if we're playing like Pathfinder this next week with my group. I could have it ready, painted and everything, and there is a special sort of feeling from knowing that you did every single part of the process. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very fulfilling to know that it came from absolutely nothing into something that you're seeing on the table and that your players are enjoying and having fun with. There we go. So let's go right here. Again, if there's any questions, my friends, feel free to ask them on the chat and I'll be happy to answer. We got the time for that as well. There we go. I think my character's a little bit chunky, so I'm gonna make him a little bit slimmer on the top. Not too much. There we go. Kind of want to make the legs a little bit longer. Now, some parts of the legs are actually going to be visible. You can see them on this concept right here. So some parts of the legs are visible. So it might be worth it to go down here and do a little bit of work. So here's a trick that I can show you to do like this, or like rocks. I'm going to use clay buildup. And I'm just going to start doing some really crazy like lines going up like this randomly. Like, it doesn't have to be like any precise sort of like pattern or anything. And we don't need to go all the way up because a lot of these things are gonna be covered, right? So we just go like this. Kind of looks like bark, right? Like a tree bark. And once we have this, we can press B, T, and D, which is turn dynamic, and we can just flatten them out. Flatten them out, and they're gonna start looking a little bit more jaggedy. And these are gonna be our guidelines to start carving in with our Damien standard and creating the effects that we're looking for. So I'm gonna go now with Damien standard. I'm gonna start carving here a little bit more aggressively. So thanks to that like sort of effect that we did right there, we can find like lines or find planes that we didn't consider before, and we create something that's a little bit more organic. This is a technique that I call layering, where you start with a very simple layer and then you just build on top of that layer. And if you need to erase this layer and build it up again, that's perfectly fine. It's what I was mentioning a couple of minutes ago. It's perfectly fine to go back and fix things or redo things if needed to get the result that we're going for. So let's keep going here. Again, trim dynamic. And we can just start cleaning all of that effect. Mainly what I want to make sure is that this reads like stone from like afar. So I'm gonna start carving it right here. Akansh, the art says, what do we need in portfolio as a character modeler? That's a great question. If you want to get into like the video game industry and you want to be a character artist, one of the things that I would recommend is having at least a female character, at least a male character, and at least a monster character. Those are like must-haves. Ideally, you would have more of those, right? Like 2 or 3 female characters, 2 or 3 male characters, 1, 2, or 3 monsters. But you need to show that you know how to interpret like a vast array of concepts. So my portfolio is not the best example because I haven't updated it in a while. But when I graduated, I had like a sci-fi robot. I had a fantasy giant, like an ice giant. I had a stylized medieval like female character. I had a goblin. What else? I had a portrait, like a realistic sort of portrait, but not ultra realistic or hyper realistic, but like semi, like stylized realistic portrait. Those were the ones that I had, and those were the ones that got me my first job out of school. So female characters, male characters, and monsters, I would say, are important for character artists. And if you can incorporate things like cool props or advanced props with some of them, that is of course a plus for your portfolio. There we go. I feel like we're missing a little bit of a belly, so I'm gonna give him a little bit more belly right there, just for the volume, right? Just for the volume. Cool. So we're in a really good position right now, I think. Our character is looking quite nice. We got a lot of details. Now we can go to the next part of details for the arms. So you guys usually know that I like to divide my stuff into primary details, secondary details, and tertiary details. Primary details would be like the big lines that we did right there. Secondary details would be the alpha channels that we just threw on top of the whole thing. And now tertiary details are all of this like little cracks and things that we need to add. So going back to the brushes here on the lightbox, there is this orb cracks too. This is really good. It's kind of like a Damien standard. It's a little bit softer, so I really like using this for the details that I'm about to add. So for instance here, you can see that we can add this sort of like crevices and things. You can see like these things are kind of like connected to each other. And this is the thing, or the part of the process that can be really time consuming. But it's also really fun. I normally, for those of you that are on the chat, and I normally don't do like super long streams, and that's why I can't really show you this part of the process, because it's a lot of time. But today, since we have this special live stream and this is a special presentation here at PAIZOCON, I can actually go in and show you all of this like intricate details. So this is the part where you can spend a long time just adding volume, adding details, and playing around with the forms of the character. Again, I strongly recommend that you carve in a little bit more than what you might think on the arms right here, because the 3D printer will lose a little bit of detail. And especially for painting, if you guys have ever painted miniatures, one technique that we use quite a bit is the wash technique, where we use a small like diluted paint texture. And by using this or doing this thing, it's going to be a little bit easier to do it. Let's see. Dr. Rooney is asking, I'm more into stylized form of art, but do I have to focus on real life model too if I'm also going for character artists? Not really. Like if you're perfectly and completely sure that the only thing that you want to do is stylized characters like League of Legends and stuff like that, you can definitely just like start learning that sort of stuff. However, if you know how to do stylized and realistic, the job opportunities that you might find will be a lot better. Now here, as you can see, I am going to be carving in the runes that the character has. So I'm going to be a little bit thinner, because even if I lose a little bit of this detail on the 3D print, I don't mind, because as you can see, it's kind of like faded. But we can definitely add the runes to the character, and I think that's one of those tertiary details that's really going to bring the whole thing together. Now the runes seem to be pretty much like sketches, so I'm just going to use like very basic like doodles right here for the runes. I'm not sure if we're using any specific like inscriptions from Galarian, but I'm just gonna keep it simple right here. Again, when we see it from the far, as long as it reads and we are what's the word, capturing the essence or the message of the character, we should be good. There we go. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Not bad, right? For those runes. And then there's another set of runes. I just want to see if they're before the wrist. So I'm gonna add another line right here. And we're gonna be doing this. Lovelu Acharji saying, please make a course on Blender hair creation for beginner friendly. Oh, that's gonna be a tough one for me, because I do know Blender. I've done Blender courses before, but I don't consider myself to be a Blender expert. So it would be a little bit difficult to make sure that I can offer something that more capable people could offer, to be honest. But I'll see what I can do. Maybe not like a full course, but we can talk about it on the YouTube channel. Let's now do the runes right here. And again, just using the orb crack, just adding all of this detail right here. No need to be perfect or spend too much time on this. Just a very quick like general overview here, and that's more than enough. There we go. There is a third rune band. Actually, there's like a fourth rune band even. but there's a third one that I can kind of see on the upper side of the arm. So I'm gonna add it. There we go. Just going around. And this one has the runes a little bit more faded, so I'm just gonna keep it really smooth. Like I'm not gonna add too much detail. Again, following a little bit of the advice that I mentioned about the rest areas. Now we don't want to overdo it and add too much detail that makes it a little bit like difficult to see or to understand. There we go. That looks good. There's a couple of extra lines here, for instance, on the bicep. Seem to be going or cutting across. You can add them. I would expect to see some more lines here on the top part. Again, don't worry too much about these lines. If you're following along, or you're doing your own, or you will be doing your own version later, don't worry too much about the super fine detail, because a lot of that stuff, if you don't have a super powerful 3D printer, like a 4K screen, like mono screen or something, there's gonna be a lot of light bleed, and you're gonna lose a lot of stuff. And also, considering that the miniature is gonna be like this big, like come on, like you're never gonna be seeing those like super small scratches, right? If you want to see a scratch, you definitely want to push the scratch quite a bit more. Let's go over here. There we go. And we can just keep adding all of these things right here. How are you guys doing? Tired already? Or are we good?
No, we're good.
Good. Any questions from you, my friend, Pinky?
Yeah, where you get that program to design that?
This one right here. This one right here is called ZBrush, and there's of course a couple of ways in which you can get it. You can get a free trial if you wanna try it out from ZBrush. I think it's like a 15-day free trial, but this is a little bit of an expensive program, I'm not gonna lie. And there is a subscription through Maxon. I believe it's like $25 or $40 a month or something like this. This is one of like the top production softwares that we use in the industry. I'm a 3D artist, so this is where you would get it. It's called ZBrush. Now Blender also has its own like sculpting part. We're not going through that right now, but all of the things that I'm explaining, like the forms and the muscles and these details and stuff, all of this information can be applied to Blender as well.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. So now I think it's time that we jump into posing, because we have a cool character right here. We already have quite a bit of detail, which is nice. And the next thing that we're gonna have to do, which is gonna take quite a bit, is gonna be the cloth, right? Like all of this cloth that we have right here is definitely a tricky thing to sculpt or to model. It's not that difficult, but it is gonna take a little while. And I would prefer if we already had the character in pose before we did the cloth. So I'm gonna save this file, which actually I haven't saved, and that's a big mistake, because if this thing would have crashed, we would have lost everything. Let's call this Vigilant. There we go. And we're gonna start posing. Now I have this save file, or I just saved this because if at any point I want to go back and change any of the things, we're gonna be needing a backup file. There's a question over here that says we should listen music during work or its effects. Yeah, I'm listening to this Diana sessions from League of Legends. It's really good, and it's free, so we're not gonna get any like copyright strike or whatever. But yeah, music is super important. Okay, so here's how we're gonna pose. It's a very simple pose. He's gonna be just like standing, and he's gonna rotate his torso slightly to one side, and then one hand is gonna be up, kind of like casting a spell, like this one right here, and the other one's gonna be like holding the other part of the spell, right? So the way we're gonna do this is by masking. We're gonna press Control, go to Mask Lasso, and we're gonna mask out the upper body of the character right here. Then sorry, we're gonna press W. We're gonna press Alt to unlock the little lock right here. Reset the pivot point and go to the center of the object right here. Just move it right to the center. And then we drop Alt. So now, if we rotate, if we invert the mask and we rotate the character without symmetry, we need to turn off symmetry, we're going to be able to get this. Just a slight twist. Now, in this case, I actually see that this guy is twisting the other way. So I'm going to rotate him to this side right here. I'm going to click on this button so that we rotate the eyes as well. So we're going to do this right there. So the character is going to be slightly looking back. I'm going to push him back a little bit as well. Now, since we're now out of symmetry, everything that we do is going to have to be asymmetrical. Any detail that we add, any like element that we fix, all of these things are going to be asymmetrical. Which, as you get better and better in 3D sculpting, shouldn't be that much of a problem. But just keep in mind that we're now working with an asymmetry perspective. I'm going to use my move brush here to move this leg a little bit to the side. And there we go. Now for the arms, this arm right here, as you can see, is positioned closer to the body, and then it's bent like with the bicep activated, right? So again, I'm gonna use mask lasso. I'm gonna mask this arm right here. Invert the mask. I'm gonna position the pivot point right there. Make sure that the elbow is showing, and we're gonna rotate this in so that we bend the arm. If we need to move it a little bit and just like modify the position, we're just gonna have to do it. And this is the thing, this is where people start freaking out, because they're like, oh my god, all the work that I did is just now being destroyed. It's not being destroyed, but it is definitely getting modified. So now we're gonna go to this part, we're gonna mask this arm right here, and we're gonna rotate this one down so that it's closer to the body. And that's gonna give us a very close pose to what we have right there. We can even try to raise the arm a little bit like this. And don't worry too much about breaking the geometry. This is again, this is a 3D print, so this is not something that we would do for production for like games and stuff. This is 3D printing, so this is perfectly fine. Now we're gonna dynamesh because we need to fix all of this stuff. And yes, we're gonna go here with our clay buildup again, for instance. And in the bicep, if we want to really like punch the bicep in, then in the standard, and we're going to start carving in to indicate that the bicep is right there on the center of the arm. Same thing here for the elbow, for instance. I'm going to push the elbow out. I'm going to use trim dynamic to sharpen the elbow and create this sort of effect, this sort of sharp effect that we normally get when we bend the arm. So it's a lot of rebuilding. Some sculptors like to do this step before doing the details so that they don't have to do the details twice. I personally prefer to do it after. Now, careful there, you can see that we get a really ugly effect over there. So we're just gonna have to fill that in and rebuild a little bit of the golem as well. Dynamesh again to clean it up. There we go. Again, not too worried about this part right here. It's gonna be covered by the rope. It's not a bad idea to clean it up a little bit. It's doing an autosave. There we go. And now the other hand, like this is the lower hand. The other hand, you can see it's actually like further up. So we're gonna do the same process. We're gonna mask the hand right here. Position the pivot point right there, in the center of the arm. Let's mask the bicep a little bit better. There we go. And then I'm gonna move the gizmo so that it matches the rotation of the arm, so we can get a cleaner leg rotation. There we go. And this hand right here, as you can see, is slightly, actually it's way more bent, and it's kind of like rotated as well. And then this whole arm, we're gonna bend it as well. So I know I'm destroying everything that we just worked for, but again, don't panic. We're gonna fix all of this. So we just move it like this. And we just start fixing this, because posing is very important. We don't want to have like boring like miniatures on our games, so posing is a really important part of the process. I'm actually gonna go to the head real quick, the whole head right there, and I'm gonna rotate around because it's also kind of like looking to the side. And again, there's a lot of things that we're gonna have to fix. This is part of the process. I kind of want to grab the hand as well, like this, like a rune section of the hand, and I'm gonna invert the element here, and we're gonna rotate the hand. Or actually, I have to rotate the whole thing, the whole arm. Because I want the hand to be kind of like pointing towards the other hand where the spell is kind of like being prepared, right? Kind of like this. There we go, that looks good. Now I'm gonna grab this arm again. Make sure that we're not selecting anything that we don't want. And from the top view, I'm gonna rotate this arm like this. There we go, look at that. So now it actually looks like this guy's preparing a spell, and then the spell is gonna be like formed here on the center of the arms, right? Now, of course, we need to do fixing. Now, I'm not too worried about the shoulders on this area, for instance, because again, the rope is gonna be like covering that. But this whole thing right here, I definitely wanna like tweak it a little bit. This is some of the back muscles, and I know that we're not gonna be able to cover all of this back muscles with just the rope. So we're gonna rebuild just a little bit of volume there. Same thing here on the head, for instance. So all of this, we definitely need to fix a little bit to create something that looks a little bit more interesting. There we go. Now we can start thinking about the fingers, for instance, and just giving them a little bit more detail, a little bit more volume if needed. Just like marking them a little bit more. Giving them the stone look. All of these things that we destroyed, probably gonna have to rebuild all of the details. Like you can see this part of the arm definitely got destroyed. It's again no big deal. We can just train dynamic and flatten this a little bit. Just recover a little bit of the volume there. Careful with this area right here. This is the kind of areas where we can just fill this in. Again, it's so close to the character that no one's gonna really care. For 3D printing again. There we go. Not bad, right? Looking good. There we go. We can go back to the alphas that we used before and clean them up as well, or just reuse them to bring back these elements. I'm gonna bring back the runes right there and clean this whole area. Do the little runes. There we go. Now to make the pose a little bit more interesting, I'm gonna select this leg right here. I'm just gonna bring it back a little bit, and then I'm gonna select this one right here, and bring it forward a little bit. Just so that when we add the rope, we can add a little bit of like flowy effect here on the back. There we go. One more thing we can do is play a little bit with the fingers, and we really don't need to mask. We can just like use the move brush, and we can just like bend the fingers slightly, or simulate the bendy effect of the fingers. We could even add like some small knuckles here to indicate that the fingers are being bent because they're casting a spell or something. There we go. And again, the fingers are going to be so small, like on the 3D print, that adding detail is really... I mean, we can add detail, it's fine, but it's such a small part of the character that it shouldn't be a big concern for us. Let's do the same thing on these fingers right here. So I'm going to add a little bit of a bend. There we go. There we go. And again, just add a little bit of knuckles there to really indicate that these things are actually bent, and that's going to give more force to the hands. So now it actually looks like he's trying to hold something, right? We could even give him a little bit of an angry face, just pushing the eyes lower. And that's it. We got a really nice pose right here. So let's save this real quick. We're gonna call this Vigilant_pose, and we're gonna keep working from this one. How are we doing on time? Cool. So we're about halfway done. I think the next hour is definitely gonna take us through the whole like rope. It's gonna be quite time consuming, but let's go.
Okay. Is there a program like that for Mac? Does it work on Macintoshes? The programs you're using?
Yeah, ZBrush is available for Mac, so you should be able to get it as well. Cool. So now we're gonna do the rope, and there are a lot of ways to do the rope, but I want to keep this as simple as possible and as accessible as possible for anyone that wants to follow along. Maybe not right now, but eventually. I mean, this whole thing is being recorded, so it's gonna be on YouTube for everyone to watch. So this one right here, we're gonna be using, or we're gonna be actually extracting it from the character, and this is how we're gonna do it. I'm gonna press Control, and we're gonna go to the mask pen, and now we're gonna start painting the areas where this rope is gonna be coming from. So all of this top part right here, going back into the character, and we're just gonna be taking care of the top rope right now. So we're gonna start right here at the hips. So we're gonna do all of this. It goes around the head like this. And we're painting this mask because we're going to be using this mask to extract a copy of the character, and we're going to be sculpting on top of that copy. So we'll just mask all of this. Very careful here on the inside of the arm, because it's a really close section right there, so we don't want to be extracting any piece from the arm. There we go. Go around the character. Oh, and we just keep masking. Control. The shortcut here is Control. We press Control to paint or to mask out all of the elements or all of the areas that we're going to be extracting. You can see there's a big hole right there on the character. Again, not that big of a deal because we're going to be fixing it later. Just keep that one in mind because it's going to be an important part. So we mask out all of this here. I'm actually going to mask out all the way to the butt. And we're going to go right here. You can see I'm masking some parts of the arm. That's fine. I'll show you how to clean that after the extraction. There we go. Thank you, David. Thank you. Thanks for being on the stream, my friend. There we go. So now that we have a good like mask for the robes, we're gonna go into geometry. Oh, sorry, subtool. We're gonna extract. Extract, and we're gonna hit extract. And as you can see, what the extract will do is it will create an extraction following that mask, which is gonna give us the sort of thickness that we want here for the robe. Now, this is one important thing about 3D printing, especially cloths in 3D printing. You always want to go a little bit thicker than you would normally do. Why? Because if you print things that are really, really thin, they will break. So in this case, as you can see, I changed my thickness to 0.04 so that we get this really, really, really thick effect here on the robe. I know that looks very, very weird, but again, don't worry too much about it. So I'm going to press this button down here, the dynamic solo, and you can see that we have this right here. I'm going to dynamesh this whole thing. So dynamesh, even though we're going to go super low poly. And I'm going to do this so that we can clean up all of the extractions that we don't need. So all of these parts right here that we got from the arm, let's just clean them up. Now, it doesn't really matter that the object on the inside is it's not hollow. But if we want to hollow this, there's a very easy way. Control, Shift, and click on this one right here. And then delete hidden. And when we dynamesh again, that whole inside is going to be closed. So by doing that, we now make sure that we don't have any more faces than what we need. I'm going to increase the resolution quite a bit here. We're going to dynamesh again. And we're going to start cleaning up. Here's where we're going to start doing our actual sculpting here for the cloth. So the first thing is using train dynamic to keep everything as flat as possible. Because cloth technically or usually is very flat against the body. So all of the muscle details and things that we have, we want those gone. We just want this to be like a sack of potatoes or like a very, very simple tunic on top of the character. And once we have this, we can start sketching the different elements that we have here on the concept. So for instance, the first thing that I see is that there's a very nice round line going around the elements or around the neck of the character. Now I'm going to go to the arms real quick and I'm going to use Control and Shift to go to select lasso, and I'm going to hide this guys right here because I don't want to see the arms right now. They're kind of like in the way, and it's easier if we can work it this way. So we're going to go here again with them in standard. And we're going to start sketching the tunics for this guy. Some people might be wondering, should we do this on another software that has like cloth simulation and all that stuff? If you want to go the extra mile, then yeah, that's a good option. But it's a lot of work again for a little creature, a little like a thing that's going to be like super small on the tabletop. So here I'm going to start carving in a little bit more to see a little bit of the neck of the character. And again, we just want indication. We just want to capture the essence of the character. So with trim dynamic here, I'm going to keep on flattening all of these things and creating this effect right here. There we go. Look at that. So that gives us this very nice clean look. Then we have a secondary one. You can see this one right here going from the top towards the belt. So again, with them in a standard, I'm gonna draw that one. And then there's another one that's coming from underneath. Same thing towards the belt. So something like that. There was another concept here. There we go. So there's two actually. Like two main lines coming on the top like this. I'm going to use clay buildup to create a little path here. And with trim dynamic again, we can flatten these things out. There we go. And again, this is just a sketch right now. This is just the initial idea of how and where things are going. I'm gonna go with clay buildup, and you can see that we can see the little bit of the hole here on the torso. We talked about this one before. So I'm gonna add that little window right there. I'll start removing some volume here so that we can actually see that little window. And then you can see that we have some lines going like horizontally towards the center as well. And this is going to allow me to create the very basic blocking of this row. Now here's one super extreme thing that I'm about to do. But you can see the robe is actually like pushing down quite a bit, like it creates this huge flare out coming down. So I'm gonna grab my move brush, and I'm actually already gonna like just like pull this whole robe down and start creating the sort of like flared out effect that we're gonna expect to see here on the character. So all of this right here, we're just gonna keep going. It's a very, very quick way to lock in a robe, as you can see right there. And all of this is just like volume, right? It's just massive of elements. Now to ignore all of this inner size, I'm actually gonna fill this like bottom part of the skirt, because no one's gonna ever see that part of the character. It's always gonna be covered. And there we go. I'm gonna use move brush here. I'm just gonna start pushing this a little bit out and in, because eventually one of the things that we're gonna have is the belt, and the belt's gonna give the character a very nice like framing for the things that are flowing here from the skirt. So I would imagine the belt to be around here, but we're gonna add the belt as a separate piece. I'm just gonna draw a line so that I can remind myself where the belt is gonna be. XD, hello, welcome to the stream, my friend. I know it's really late here in Mexico. It's probably very early over there, right? There we go. So now that we have this, we can continue working on the details here on the robe. So for instance, this piece right here, it's this like hanging bit. It's gonna go all the way over here, and I can already add a little bit of the detail here and push it into a different sort of volume. 10:32 a.m. over there. Nice. Let's go over here. So that line right there that we have, it would probably go back and do something very similar on the back of the character. So I would expect the line to go over here as well, go underneath the belt, and then probably like hang back to this side right here. And then same thing for this one. This one's coming from this side. It goes around, goes towards the belt, and then from the belt it goes towards the outside. Let's start removing a little bit of volume from here as well. This is what we would expect to see. Again, a little bit of the skin of this character. There we go. There we go. Let's just remove brush here to straighten this line right there. all of this area should be a little bit more visible. We're gonna have some lines or some parts of the cloth going this way, but then a lot of the other ones are gonna be going the opposite direction. So we're gonna have to start cleaning up some of this cloth shortly. But again, we're just in the similar, very similar way to how we started the anatomy of the character with like a sketching phase. We're doing the same thing here, but now we're doing the sketch for the cloth. Let's bring the arms back so we can see how this thing is looking. Not bad. And we just keep going over here. I would expect to see again some cloths like being overlapped on this side right here. And again, this is where the belt is gonna be. We're gonna add that one shortly. And then it just flows into this long cloth, like columns. There's a question over here. It says, which is the best way to create a Last of Us kind of environment for outdoors, seeing grass, plants, forests? SpeedTree. SpeedTree is definitely one of the softwares that I would use for that sort of like vegetation. You definitely need some sculpting tools, so ZBrush would be a really good one as well for sculpting like ruins and buildings and stuff like that. And then if you're gonna do characters, well, of course, ZBrush and something like Maya or Blender. XD says, I'm new to ZBrush. Can you suggest any of your courses for beginners? The Complete Guide to ZBrush 2022, it's a great way to start. That's probably the best one. There we go. Cool. Okay, cool. So now that we have a really nice like starting point here for the character, we can definitely start adding or start working on more of the details for this golem. So I'm gonna start with the bands, which I think are really like important for the character. And as you can see, I'm using clay buildup here to build them up. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use trim dynamic to flatten them, to make this sort of like cloth, like flatted or flat cloth effect. And the best trick that I can teach here for cloth, especially this one right here, is after the trim dynamic, if we want to really separate this like pillar of cloth from all of the other mesh that we have, I'm going to use Damien as standard, but I'm going to press the Alt key on the border of the element, and this is going to create a sharp line along that border. As you guys can see, that sharp line that I'm creating there, it really separates the element of the cloth. So it's a very good way to give this sort of like etch to the cloth that could catch paint very nicely as well for like an edge highlight. And it also separates it from the other sections of the cloth that we're gonna have. So now it reads as if that piece is a separate piece from the character. We're gonna go over here. Let's go here and let's hide the arms again. There we go. And we're hiding the arms just so that we can work on this, on the character a little bit better. So that means standard positive and negative to create this sort of like division. It does look a little bit like chewed on, like it's not a perfect line or a perfect cut, but we can fix it a little bit in just a second. And the important thing is that it starts reading as if there's like layers of cloth on the character. So now I'm going to use clay buildup. I'm gonna start adding some of this like fibers again to sort of like bring back the like cloth layer effect and fill the gaps. Trim dynamic again. We're just gonna clean this whole thing up. Some people might like that sort of like a chewed effect, where that's it kind of looks like a damaged robe. If that's the effect you guys are going for, then yeah, that works. This is the cool thing about 3D and art in general, is that you're free to do pretty much what you want, especially when you're doing your own projects. When you're working for a client, it's a little bit different, but when you're doing your own projects, you're free to be creative and do the things that you want. There we go. Not bad. Now I kind of like this thing right here. Like I think it would be a nice idea to add the crystal. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it because it would require a couple more complex things, but it's a nice detail. Now let's add some more like wrinkles here. Again, indicating that there's like overlaps and different like clothing layers that are going in and out of this effects. Again, we gotta keep in mind, like for instance, if I just zoom out and get to about this point, this is roughly like on my screen, this is roughly the size that the character is gonna be at. So as long as the things that I'm doing read nicely at this level, then we're good. Okay, like there's no need to worry and try to create perfect looking sculptures when the size that you're going to be printing them at is going to be so small. That's one of the things that I really like about 3D printing, is the fact that depending on the size of your 3D print, you can ignore a lot of things that we would normally spend hours and hours fixing and tweaking to get right. Go. Now for instance here, I do want to bring back a little bit of the volume so that it looks like there's a border of the robe, like going over the shoulder. Something like that. Gonna be like some sort of robe there coming from the back. Let's trim dynamic this, and there we go. And then all of this cloth right here, we can bring it flowing to the front. Cool, that looks good. Okay, let's add the belt. So for the belt, we're going to keep it really simple. I'm just going to append here a new cylinder. And then I'm going to scale it. I'm going to flatten it. Something that we could also do inside of what's the word? Blender. I'm going to do it here. And then if we Dynamesh, and we increase the resolution a little bit, we're gonna get this really interesting like soft effect. And then the only thing we need to do is with move brush, we just push it out in a couple of areas. We might need to break symmetry because the belt is not perfectly symmetrical everywhere. As long as it's just like hugging the surface of the character. And one of the things that we do want to keep is try to keep that as straight as possible. And there we go. I'm going to use trim dynamic here again. I'm definitely going to give this a lot more resolution. I'm going to start like flattening this. For miniatures, belts are usually like overlaid like this because it makes it again very easy to use a wash or a dry brushing technique to hit the high points of the figure. So we don't want to keep them like super close to the character. I know this looks it looks a little bit fake because it's there's like a lot of volume there, but it makes a lot easier to paint if we do it this way. And then what we can do is we can actually go back to the cloth, and if we want to make the cloth a little bit more realistic, we can bundle it up a little bit on that area. So if we go to the cloth here, one of the things that we can do is with move brush, we can push the cloth forward a little bit so that it looks like the belt is actually like creating some pressure right there. But we still want to leave at least a little bit of an edge on the belt. Again, just because it's so much easier once this thing is 3D printed to paint those areas. But we can definitely simulate the way cloth bundles up on top of a belt right there. We're gonna go now here, and we're gonna add a little bit more volume right there. Again, we just want to describe the direction of the cloth. Even Damien Standard here might be a good idea to indicate that there's some like lines of the robe that are going this way. And then here I would expect to see this like lines flowing out, right? So here we have this like big band. So I would expect this big band to kind of like be pushed and then flow in this direction. Same trick, we're gonna use Thermodynamic here to go right here. We got another message from Justin and arigato from Kaushal Jadhav. Justin says, found nobody into a live stream, love your channel. I went to school for 3D years ago but never got to finish. Been taking your courses to relearn. You've inspired me to get back into it. There you go, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, we've been doing this. This is the longest stream I've done so far. 2 hours so far, and we're gonna go for 4. We're gonna be going here until we finish this guy and get him ready for 3D print. So we get this line going down here. There we go. Again, I'm gonna zoom out to like the rough distance that I'm gonna be seeing this character when it's 3D printed, and as long as it looks good at this distance, then I'm happy. Like because I know again that if we get it to look nice at this distance, my players are going to be happy. Because again, you're probably going to be seeing it on a table like at this position or like at this distance. So it's very, very important to judge the result from the perspective that you're going to be using it. Now I'm going to add this central banner in just a second, but I'm actually going to add it as a secondary subtool to get more silhouette and more volume. There we go. Let's clean this up a little bit here. I do want to add a little bit of a pillar right there. And I'm going to use Thermodynamic to flatten the border, because I want the rope to be smaller. Now you can see this like things right here. This guys do push out a little bit more, so I'm gonna mask them out, and then with move brush I'm gonna like make them hang a little bit more. And then again with the technique that we talked about before, the Damien Standard technique, we're gonna be adding the edge border right here. We keep going over here. And there we go. Look at that. So that's gonna like really push this band forward. And we're gonna do the same thing on this side right here. Push it in there to make it seem like it's being held by the belt. And there we go. Now let's add a little bit more movement here on the characters. I'm gonna carve in there and there, because I don't want the tunic to be like really fat. So we're gonna add some nice pillars over here, and then really smooth them out. Make the cloth flow a lot more. There's a 3D artist that I really admire. He has a Patreon. His name is Andrea Tarabella, Artisan Guild, super famous miniature creator. And he does this thing with the skirts where he adds a lot of flow to them. So I kind of want to like mimic a little bit of that. Like a little bit of that sort of like flow that we get with long skirts. And having those like high points on the skirts, they can be really, really fun as well to paint. Now on the back, I'm actually gonna use this band right here. It's coming from the front. And once it hits the belt, it's gonna flare out like this. Isadon Igbo says, I've been on 3D school for over a year now. I really love your channel. Thank you, my friend. Thanks for following. There we go. It's gonna be the secondary one. Now over here, I'm gonna go trim dynamic, and we're gonna make this guys a little bit more square. There we go. Keep flattening this right here. And now it's time that we start adding some like details on this area right here. So again, let's add some interesting like folds and curvatures here. Mainly to indicate the flowiness of the skirt. Now, as you can see, a lot of the brush strokes are really showing, and I don't want to have as many of those, so I'm gonna go very quickly here with smooth to clean all of these elements. And again, if we zoom out a little bit to see the effect that we would see, or the sort of like scale that we're going for, which is again something like this, we can start appreciating where we need to push things a little bit more. Let's bring the arms back now, so we can see the actual. There we go. That looks really cool. So this is the actual mini that we're going to be printing. Let's add the bands here on the back. There we go. There we go. And we're just gonna go to this side right here. Let's just wait for the autosave. I'm not complaining, because if we lose everything, I would be very mad. You know, you love the direct as well, Isidon? Where are you from, my friend? Where are you from, Isidon? Let's just turn dynamic here to flooding this. There we go. Now I can see that there's a couple of details that we could definitely add to the character. So for instance, on this like lower cape, there is a border. So I'm gonna use my Damien Standard to draw the border. And that border is also gonna be a super great idea to divide the main bands from all of these things. There we go. And it's one of those details that reads very, very nicely on the character. There we go. And we just keep going. Nigeria, nice. Look at that. All we're on the other side of the world. There we go. I'm trying to see the clock because I want to make sure. I want to try to get the whole high poly ready before 12. So in the next like 30 minutes, to use the last hour for the what's the word? For the 3D printing process, which is quite complex as well. Well, it's not super complex, but it does take a little bit of time to prepare the whole thing. Let's add some horizontal like bundles of cloth right here. Again, indicating that there's like layers and layers of cloth going around the character. Let's fix a little bit of the anatomy here. This is the point where I'm gonna start jumping from one thing to another. Because this is where you start like seeing the whole picture, like the whole character, and be like, okay, how can I make this better? So for instance, I think we can add a line decorating like the border of this like big lines or big banners. I'm a little bit concerned about the like if it's gonna be visible or not on the 3D print, but we can add it anyway. Very, very carefully we start adding all of these details. Another thing we can do for the cloth, for instance, is with clay buildup, we can add some damage. Damage is always cool. So a couple cuts like here and there on the cloth to indicate that this guy has been on adventures, right? And he maybe went through the abomination balls or something and came out on top. Let's just a little bit of trim dynamic here to clean that area just a bit. We got a couple more details here on the neck. We can make it look like wrinkles. There we go. Just keep going up and down here. There we go. There we go. Cool, there we go. That looks really nice. Now let me see if there's any like pattern or logo I could add, because I feel like this whole area could really benefit from some sort of logo or something. Like this whole thing, like a pattern, like something there will be interesting. But that, I guess that's something that you could paint on later on with traditional paints. So let's add some of the other details that we need or that we're missing. Because right now this is looking quite nice. We're still missing a couple of details. So first of all, we're missing the belt buckle. And I'm gonna keep it really, really simple, to be honest. I'm just gonna create a sphere right here. I'm gonna bring the sphere forward. Make like this or like small shape. And you can see the belt buckle is kind of like a moon shape. It's kind of like a circle as well. So I'm just gonna get this right there on the center. It's definitely a lot smaller. Not smaller than the belt, but just a little bit smaller, like that. And then I'm actually gonna draw this on top of the belt. So there's like a belt buckle there, like a small detail there, like another detail there. Actually, that's a bad idea, because as you can see right there, they're matching with the lines of the actual cloth. So you never want to do that, because that creates something called a tangent, and that makes things look a little bit weird. It's not a belt; it's more like a rope or something. So I'm just gonna do something simple like that. Let's do them in the standard here to create the lines on this area right here. Icy Film is asking if the live is going to be on the channel. Of course it's going to be. All of the lives are on the YouTube channel, guys. So if you go to Nextut on YouTube and you go to the live section, all of the lives are going to be there. I always make sure to publish the lives, so all of the lives are there. And tomorrow's class is also going to be there. Avdallah says, hi, about your ZBrush tutorial, the advanced character creation on Monica. I'm really excited to start with it, but I want to finish my exams first. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's been a long time since I've been in school, but I still remember the stress of exams. I can't believe how old I am now. I'm about to be 31, my friends. 31. Feels like a freaking lifetime. Actually, I don't like that one. That one looks weird. Let's clean this up a little bit. There we go. That's looking good. If we take a quick render here, that this is what we would be like 3D printing. This is how it would look, and it's looking quite nice. I definitely think we need to go a little bit deeper on some of the lines, because again, I'm a little bit worried that this is not going to be like deep enough for the printer to properly print. We're gonna see. In just a couple of minutes, we're gonna jump into Sheetbox, and we're gonna be taking a look at the preparation of the 3D print. I'm the same age as you, my friend. There you go. See, we have more in common than you think. Okay, so I think the final thing that we need for the cloth here, and this should leave us some time for like details and stuff, is like the main tabard that we have here in the front. So I'm gonna show you a trick here. I'm gonna go to the cloth here, and I'm gonna mask out where I want this tabard to be like coming from, which is gonna be something like this. And then we're gonna extract again, but we're gonna extract with 0 thickness. This is very important, because we're gonna create a thin piece of geometry. This one right here. We're gonna delete this one by hiding it and deleting hidden, and then we're gonna see remesh. And then we're gonna go to geometry, see remesher. We're gonna say half, and we're gonna keep see remeshing a lot, like a lot, until we get really low poly, like this. And once we have this, we can go to dynamic subdiv and use thickness to get an idea of how this thing would look. So we can do something like the offset of the thickness is all going to be forward, so something like this. And I'm going to use move brush to have this facing forward. I'm going to turn dynamic subdiv off. I'm actually going to delete like this vertex right there, so that when we do dynamic subdiv, this is like the tabard that we're getting. I'm gonna push this back so that it's actually like floating a little bit. I'm gonna hit apply, and there you go. We got a new like tabard section that we can play around, give it a little bit of flow. And this is geometry, so at any point we can give this a couple of subdivisions and just add the detail to make this actually look like cloth. Now, of course, I'm going to use Trim Dynamic to soften the curvature there a little bit. There we go. Says Icy Film, MB, I respect you how you're so good and master the 3D modeling. But here's the thing, my friend. Everyone has a different path in life. Like, I remember when I was at school, I was like 19, 20 years old when I was in school. And there was a dude that was my same age, and he had been working on 3D since he was like 10 years old. So he was a freaking master. He already knew a lot of stuff. And even the teachers told him, like, what the hell are you doing here? You should be working. Like, you already know all the things that we're teaching. But he wanted, of course, like the connections and the diploma and everything. So it was worth it for him. But that's the thing. Like, everyone has a different path in life. So don't be... I don't like comparing myself to anyone or anyone comparing themselves to me, because we are all going through different things. So there might be some areas where you are way, way, way better than me. I'm sure there are a lot of them. So that's the thing. Like, everyone grows and learns at different stages. So don't be too worried about it. There we go. I really want to add the crystal. Like, I really, 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 really want to add the crystal. So I'm gonna show you guys how we can do it. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to another shape right here. I'm gonna do a cube, and I'm gonna rotate the cube 45 degrees to the front, and then I'm gonna rotate it. Actually, that's fine. I'm gonna scale this a little bit. Let's make this a polymesh 3D, and then actually, let's do this in, I think it's gonna be easier if we do it in Blender, maybe. I'm not sure. Now let's do it here, that's fine. I'm gonna use the the knife curve. So I'm gonna cut this one right here. There we go. And this one right here. There we go. Let's now scale this so that it's a little bit more square. And we're gonna Dynamesh. And then with Trim Dynamic, and without what's the word? Without symmetry, we're just gonna start giving it a little bit of a different look. It's just like beveling and creating a little bit of facets all around the elements. So it's like this, like sort of like a magic crystal. And then we go back to the character. I'm gonna say subtool, append, and we're gonna append that cube. We're of course gonna scale this down. And this is the trick. We're gonna have this crystal sticking out of the chest of the character. So we're gonna be using the chest as sort of an anchor point for the crystal. Okay, because one of the things about 3D printing is we cannot 3D print something that's floating, right? Like that would be that would be ridiculous. So it's not about doing this, but we need to push this in such a way that's like right there inside of the hands, but at the same time kind of like anchoring itself to the chest. So it's poking out of the chest. It does look a little bit weird, but when you paint it, or if you paint this is going to look really, really nice. So we're using the chest as a sort of like an anchor point for this crystal to be just like protruding from. And as you can see, this is gonna look way, way, way more advanced, right? Like this looks really, really damn cool. Let's go to the foot right now, and we got 20 more minutes. 20 more minutes to just fix a couple of things right here. and prepare this for 3D printing, which is going to be the next stage. So one of the things that we definitely are missing, and I would like to add it right now, is the base. You guys remember that we did a very simple like cylindrical base at first? Well, we need to bring something here, because otherwise this character is not going to be able to stand anywhere. I kind of want to play a little bit with the flow of the cloth a little bit more. So I'm going to push this in and then push this out, so it kind of like flows a little bit more onto the outside. It's gonna make the character look a little bit slimmer as well from the back. Because again, I'm trying to picture this when you see it on the tabletop, when you're playing with this thing. You gotta see it from all of the angles. So if people are seeing it from all of the angles, you should always have some interesting angle to show for. So here, kind of want to push this, because this angle right now looks a little bit boring to me. So I'm gonna push the skirt. That looks a little bit better. So just adding this little curvature right there, I think it looks a little bit better. That's a really nice curvature right there. That's really nice right there. So in general, I think this is working quite nicely. So now the next thing that we need to do is the base. So for the base, I'm gonna append a cylinder. I'm gonna bring the cylinder down, make it smaller. And I usually like the bases to be a little bit bigger than the character itself. So something like this, so that we can actually see the base. Otherwise it's I don't know, feels like you're not really using the base. So yeah, once we have this, we're just going to position it. Even if there's a little bit of overlap, that's fine. However, usually you don't want to have overlap. It depends on how you 3D print the character, right? Some people like to 3D print them with the faces on. I personally don't like to do that. So I'm going to go here. And we're going to go to C-Modeler. I know a lot of people don't like C-Modeler, but it's a handy tool when we're in here. We're going to start by deleting some edges. It should complete. So all of those. And then this edge right here, we're going to bevel. The edge loop complete. And then this polygroup right here, we're going to QMesh polygroup island. Or sorry, inset first. Inset polygroup island. And then this polygroup, we're going to QMesh and push it down. And then we're going to bevel this edge right there and this edge right there. So when we press Ctrl D and we smooth this out, we get a nice smooth base. And finally, to decorate this base a little bit better, I'm gonna append another cylinder. Let's make it smaller and a lot thinner. We're gonna Dynamesh. And we're just gonna decorate this as if it was, I don't know, like stone or like just, I'm gonna use clay buildup and I'm gonna use a spray and just add texture. This is just texturing this as if it was like a rock or something. Just a very simple base. We don't want the base to be like removing protagonism from the character, right? So let's get rid of this. It's just a very simple base, but we can add like a little bit of grass later on, again in painting or something. It get a nice result. Akash says, should we live Unreal type hair on ZBrush? Do you mean that you want me to do a live stream on how to do hair inside of ZBrush? Because we can schedule that. I don't usually do hair inside of ZBrush, to be honest. I find it to be a little bit of a waste of time, because if you're gonna be doing hair for production, you might as well just do it on like XGen or Ornatrix or whatever other softwares are there. There we go. Cool. So that's pretty much it for the sculpting side of things. If we do a quick BPR right here, this is how the little sculptor will look. The shadows are a little bit too intense right now, so I'm gonna go render, BPR shadow. Let's add a little bit of blur, a little bit of angle, so they're a little bit softer. There we go. So if we 3D print this, or actually when we 3D print this, which is gonna be tonight, this is how it should look, which is not bad, if I may say so myself. I mean, for 2 or 3 hours that we've been working on this, I think we've managed to get something that looks really, really cool. I think it's time we add a couple more detail before we jump into the 3D printing stuff. So I'm gonna go to the character, and I'm gonna go to my brushes. And if you remember, we had our brushes. So let's add a little bit of noise here. I'm gonna be a little bit more intense on the damage of the stone, especially on the areas such as the elbow and stuff where we were fixing things. The hell was that? A spider or something? All of these areas having a little bit more detail might not be a bad idea. And then I do want to add some high frequency details such as this rock noise on certain areas. So like on the hands, a little bit here on the fingers. This is something that we might not even see, to be honest, because it's very, very small. And finally, we can go again with the orb brush, orb cracks, and we can start adding some like more intense like scratches and things, just to indicate that he's been to battle, right? Like all of that stuff tends to work really, really well. I'm actually gonna add a little bit of damage to the belt. There we go. So it's like damaged leather there on the belt. Let's see. We got a question from Abdullah. It says, lately I've been thinking a lot about AI, and is it going to affect our jobs and how much? I think in order to create Midjourney-like program for 3D, you have to create a very large database of models, and that's hard because you can steal them like images. Yeah, so I actually had a question by a good follower here from the channel yesterday about this. AI is definitely scary, and I understand the scariness of it, because as creatives, like knowing that AI is coming and that there's nothing like we can really do, it can be quite intimidating. But my advice is the following: AI is not going anywhere. Like there's nothing that we could do to stop it, right? Like it's gonna keep going, or it's gonna keep coming. So what we need to do is we need to use AI as a tool to make our lives easier. So instead of seeing AI as the enemy, we need to start seeing it as a tool that we can use to benefit. It's kind of like you either roll with it or you get like roll over by it. I don't know if that makes sense, but we need to see AI as the next like industrial revolution. It's definitely gonna make jobs disappear, which is scary, but there's also gonna be a lot of new jobs out there that require this sort of technologies and this sort of like knowledge. So it's more about learning how to adapt, I would say. That would be my advice. I don't think we're gonna be seeing a 3D sort of like generation thing soon, but maybe in the next couple of years we'll find something like, hey, make, I don't know, like a traffic cone or something. I actually have seen some demos of people doing that, but then the meshes that they generate, they're like Dynamesh meshes. So for games and stuff like that, you're still gonna have to optimize and retopologize, get proper UVs, texture. So there's, I think we're still like a lot of time, there's still a lot of time that is gonna have to pass until we can like automate every single thing that we do in 3D. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. But again, my advice would be keep yourselves like up to date with what the hell's going on, because we need to adapt. Like we cannot just sit with our arms crossed and wait for the for the whole thing with AI to run over us. Yeah, Ariane was there you go. Yogesh says, do I need to learn ZBrush as an environment artist also? Yes, I would say so. I would say yeah, that you do need ZBrush as an environment artist. There we go. So that's it. With 10 minutes to spare, we are pretty much done with the high poly process of the of this 3D mini class that we're doing. So let's save this real quick. That's our Vigilant pose. And then now the next step is we need to bring this into Blender, and we need to properly calibrate things so that we can bring them into Box and start preparing something that's called the supports. So I'm gonna be explaining how all of this works, but I need to take a very quick bathroom break, so I'm gonna be back in 5 minutes, okay guys? So just 5 minutes, hang on tight, and I'll be right back. I'm not gonna take long. Okay, so we're back. We're back. Now, the next thing we're going to be working with, guys, is we're going to go through the 3D printing process. And I'm going to be explaining a little bit of the theory behind 3D printing. I actually have... Actually, I don't have it. It was over here, but I don't see it anymore. We're going to go through how 3D printing works nowadays, the different types of 3D printing that we have and all that stuff. But first, we need to export this character right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the lower part of this element right here. And we are going to be hiding the base. We're not going to be doing the base right now. We're just going to be doing the character right here. Let me just make sure. Yeah, he's got a little crystal. Cool. So, oh, sorry. So what we're going to do here is we're going to combine all of these things that we have into a single mesh, because we need to make sure that every single thing that we have is a single watertight mesh. A watertight mesh is a mesh that has no holes in it. It's just a solid block of clay. So we're going to do this by going to booleans. I'm going to select live boolean here, and I'm going to say merge, or sorry, boolean, and then make boolean mesh. By doing this, can I perform? Wait, which one is invalid? I don't think we had an invalid one. We have like a... Okay, let's do merge visible. So merge visible. There we go. So now every single tool is a single element right here. And what we can do is we can bring our Dynamesh resolution all the way to something like 1500 and say Dynamesh. Whoa, let's try that again. So 1500 and Dynamesh. And what that should do is we're going to be combining every single part of our character in a single mesh, okay? Even like the prism there coming out of the chest, every single part of the character is going to be combined into a single mesh. And once we have this, we can do a process called decimation, which is going to bring all of the polygons that we have right here into a lower version of the element. So I'm going to say C plugin, decimation master, and we're going to do a decimation all the way down to 250k, which is one of the presets that we have right here. Once we have that, we're going to be able to export this into Blender. And once we're in Blender, we're going to be able to properly size this thing so that it measures and it looks as nice as possible once we 3D print it. So let's just wait for this to finish the decimation process. And we're going to be ready to go into the 3D printing section of this class. There we go. Almost there, almost there. The more complex the element, the more this thing will take to do its thing. But in this case, it should be pretty much done right now. There we go. Almost there. There we go. So this is it. This is the final like STL tool or thing that we're going to be using to finish our character. I'm going to do a couple of tweaks here, just with clay buildup. Kind of want to push that in. Looks a weird like webbing that we have there in between the fingers. And yeah, that's it. This is looking good. So I'm gonna go up here to the options and we're gonna export this. Again, we're gonna do this on the desktop for now. And we're gonna export this as an OBJ and we're gonna call this a Vigilant. There we go. Hit save. Now we're gonna open Blender. Here's where the fun part's gonna start. So if we're inside of Blender and we bring that OBJ in, so we say import and we import the OBJ. Let's go to our desktop. We got our Vigilant. You're gonna see that the size of this thing is humongous. Humongous. It's just ridiculously big. If we create a cube here inside of Maya, say mesh cube, that or Blender, sorry, that's the size that we want. So I'm gonna grab this character. I'm gonna make this really small, like that, and then even smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, because this cube is supposed to be like 1 meter high. So I want to make this character, well, a lot smaller. So I want to make this character, we mentioned this, it's 32 millimeters from the base of the feet to the top of the head. So that means that if I were to create a new cube, and I say cube, and I go to the options over here, Varjasian, welcome my friend, I'm going to select the size, I'm going to say 3 meters. So that's the volume that I want my character to occupy. I'm gonna go right here, let's go to wireframe view, and if I bring this up right around there, you can see that our character is a little bit smaller than 3 meters, so we probably need to scale this up a little bit more. So I'm expecting this 3 meters to be 3 centimeters, which will be like an inch. But we actually, or I would actually like to check the scale like properly, and I'm actually gonna be bringing a tool. Let me see if I have one right here. Actually don't think I have one. Do I? That's fine. Let's keep it like this for now. So this is supposed to be 3 centimeters, which, if my calculations are not wrong, let me clean some of this stuff. If my calculations is not wrong, should be fine. But I actually want to make this guy slightly bigger. So I'm gonna scale the character again, so that it's like 3.5 meters, so 35 millimeters, because he's supposed to be like a big chunky guy. So something like this. There we go. Now this guy right here, I'm gonna hit right click and I'm gonna go to, or sorry, on the character I'm gonna go to object, transform. Let's apply. Where is it? We're gonna apply there we go. Apply all transforms. And this we're gonna export file, export, and we're gonna export this as an STL. Very important. We need to export this as an STL. So this STL is gonna be called Vigilant. And the reason why we need to export this as an STL is because the STL is the like universal 3D printing like file that we normally use. Now, let's talk about 3D printing. 3D printing is this technology that's been around for several years now, and every year like this thing just becomes better and better and cheaper for everyone. So a couple of years ago, the first type of 3D printing that was available for like big consumers was the filament 3D printer, which it's a relatively cheap way to get into the 3D printing thing. But unfortunately, due to the way this works and the detail that you're able to achieve, it's not that good. You can actually print like tabletop miniatures with a filament 3D printer, but you're not gonna get as much detail. This one is a lot better for big things such as like environment pieces or like decorations and stuff like that. But for small stuff, the thing that has been growing and growing is the resin 3D printers. So a resin 3D printer works in a very interesting way. You have this thing right here, which is the box where the whole like system is like present, and we have this thing called the build plate, which, as you can see, is actually upside down. And this is important because when we 3D print, we need to make sure that we orient our element in the best possible way to ensure a successful 3D print. So the way a resin 3D printer works is you have this, again, this little like box. You fill this box with resin, and then you lower the plate until it touches the screen that's underneath this little like tank. The screen then turns all of the pixels on that contain your sculpture, and those pixels harden and create the base of your like miniature. It does this every single layer. It slices your object into multiple layers, and once it finishes, you get something like this, where your object is attached to the build plate and it has all of the supports and stuff. We're gonna talk about the supports shortly, but this is how a 3D printer plate looks after it's finished printing. And the cool thing about the resin 3D printers compared to the filament 3D printers is that resin 3D printers are faster. They are more precise for small elements. However, the process to clean everything is definitely a little bit more what's the word? It's more messy. That's the word. It's more messy because you need to use alcohol and do a lot of cleanup. Yes, Peter, we're gonna have one more stream today. We're gonna have two streams today. One is this one. We're almost over. We're gonna have one more hour, and then there's gonna be another class in like 9 hours or something, and it's gonna be another 4-hour class. We're not adding colors to this one. We're not adding colors to this one. This one's just gonna be a 3D print, and this is the character right here. So the resin 3D printer is the ideal way that we can use to 3D print things for miniature gaming, which is what we use here in Pathfinder. So let's go. Let's open Cheetahbox. Cheetahbox is the software that we use for my particular brand of 3D printer. I have an Elegoo Mars, and this is the way the interface looks. It's very easy to use. First, we need to open our file right here, and we're gonna open our Vigilant. And the first thing that we need to see is whether or not the size is correct. And as you can see right here, this is not the correct size. Like, this is way too big. This is the build plate, which is roughly the size of a cell phone, and this is the miniature, which is way too big. So that means that even though the STL was working fine, the scale was not working fine. But we can go here to the scale and say, hey, you know what, like, instead of this size, let's go 0.1, so 10 times smaller. That's way too small. It's a teeny weeny element right there. There we go. We can also try scale to fit size. There we go. That's a little bit more like it. I still feel like it's a little bit too big. Like, if we check the scale right here, you can see that from on the y-axis, it's 73 millimeters high. So 73 millimeters is way too much. So instead of 13 elements right here, we're gonna go to 7. And by going to 7, as you can see now, our y-axis is 38 millimeters. This looks a little bit better, but now it looks a little bit small, to be honest. And here's where having another miniature is a perfect way to compare sizes. So I'm gonna very quickly go to my mini factory. My Mini Factory is a free place where you can download miniatures, and I do believe there's other Mexican guys called Cast and Play. Cast and Play. There we go. And these guys always give away like free objects. Oh, sorry, it's not My Mini Factory. It's Thingiverse. So if we look, okay, if we look for Cast and Play, these guys give away some of their miniatures. No, okay, let's look for Artisan Guild. This is another one, and it's always, there we go. So this guy is giving away some free elements. So if we look for like this one right here, this is a free, like a sorcerer kind of like girl. So if we download these files, we're going to be able to compare the size of her character to the size of one of the other miniatures that are being sold on the market right now. And we're going to be able to match specifically, or get as close as possible to the size that we would like to have. Okay, so let's just wait 10 more seconds for this thing to allow us to download, and we'll be good to go. We're already breaking our record here with our stream. Over 3 hours. That's it. So if we take a look at the folder here, let me just unzip the files right here. And if we go into the files, we can just look for the character. Again, here in Cheetah Box. So we got this apprentice female, no hood. There we go. And if we compare the size, like this is how big a normal like miniature is. Let's rotate this guy right here. That's a human miniature. So if I want my character to be a little bit bigger, we can play a little bit with the scale. Let's keep the scale at like 10%. That's way too much. Let's try 8%. There we go. I think 8% looks good. So compared to the character, I think 8% for like this like big rock golem is quite nice. We might even go a little bit smaller to like 7.5%. I think yeah, let's do 7.5%. I think 7.5% looks a little bit more in line with like a traditional medium-sized character. Now, I did like the base that I did, but I think this base that we have with this character is a little bit better. So let me see if there's a base. Yes. So I'm just gonna drag and drop the base from the files that we just got, and we're gonna be using this base for our character. And now comes the point or the process where we need to create supports for this character, okay? So if we just were to print this thing right now, more probably, or the most like probable development of this thing would be that our print would fail and this guy would fall out of the supports. So if you remember when I was showing you here like the resin 3D printer, all of the prints when they come out of the plate, they have all of these supports. Look at this. So these are the supports that we need to build so that when we 3D print our character, it prints properly, and then the cleaning process is us going through the motions of cleaning this up, like removing all of the supports and getting our character ready. Akansh is adding, what's the 3D printing format in Maya? STL as well. You can go to the plugin manager and you can select STL and export as STL as well. You can also export as OBJ, but I do recommend doing STL first, or it's just a little bit better to do STL, to be honest. Now, the best way to 3D print a character is to try to have as little supports as possible, because the more supports that we have, the more like damage this sculpture is gonna get, okay? So in order to avoid having those or that many supports, I'm gonna grab this character and I'm gonna rotate him back like this and then like this, okay? This sort of like 45-degree angle for the character is probably the best type of like way in which we can support a character, because it allows us to hide the supports on the back part of the character, and also it makes it a lot easier to print objects. Let me go real quick to Photoshop and show you this, because this is super important for 3D printing. And this is something that you might find even if you download elements from the internet. So when you have an object, right? Let's imagine we have like the little prism that we did, like the little crystal. When you have a crystal like this, and you want to 3D print it, you need to define how would you place this like crystal on the plate. If we place it like this, we're going to have a lot of supports all around the element. And that means that we're going to have a lot of marks when we remove all of those supports. However, if we print it like one face down into the plate like this, I don't know, something like this. I'm a little bit bad with perspective right here. Then it's going to become very difficult to get this thing out of the plate. So we need to find a balance, and that's why we rotate this thing like 45 degrees. So it's kind of like on its side, so that we can use one of the corners, in this case of this crystal, to support it and get as few lines or as few marks as possible. Also, imagine we have a character, for instance, that's pointing forward. Okay, we have a character and the character is pointing forward. All of this area, since it's floating around in space, all of that part that's pointing forward, it's going to need supports. And that's going to make it really, really difficult again to print and to make sure that this is successful. However, if we make the character like on its back, on the back like this no longer needs as many supports. We might need 1 or 2 supports right there, but all of this arm right here is going to be supporting itself as we start building the plate. So the orientation of how we 3D print our characters is super, super important to make sure that we get the best possible results. That's why I'm moving my character like this, because for instance the crystal, instead of having to support the crystal with one long support going all the way to that point, by moving my character like this, I can make sure that the crystal is supported by the chest, and therefore we're not going to need any supports. I'm going to rotate the character a little bit more to the front, just a tad bit, there we go, something like that. And now we can jump onto the support creation. So inside of Cheat Box, there's 3 types of supports: heavy supports, medium supports, and light supports. I always like to start with heavy supports, and I always like to go to the bottom part of the character. As you can see, all of these red things that we're seeing, that's the software telling me, hey, all of those areas are dangerous areas. If you don't support those areas, the sculpture or the 3D print might fail. So we're gonna go all the way to the bottom, and this is gonna allow me to show you how 3D printing works. The way this works is every single time a new layer is being like hardened, it's gonna go through the elements right here, and it will find where our pixels are. So for instance, those are the first time we actually see our pixels right there. So if it gets to this point, to the layer 100, and it tries to print this object, that little corner right there, it might say insignificant, but if it tries to print that corner right there, and that corner, that point has no support, then that corner is going to be stuck to the bed, to the little like tank that we have. And when we keep that tank, or when we continue to print, we're not going to be able to print the whole figure, and therefore the whole print is going to fail. So what we need to do is, once we see the full character, we need to see where the full character has the most important points, which in this case would be the legs of the character down here. And we need to add supports to those areas to make sure that this print does not fail. So I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here, and we're going to start looking for all of these islands. Some of you might be tempted to go and use the automatic option, but unfortunately automatic things are not always perfect, and especially for complex model like this Pathfinder ones, we're not going to be able to get the best result. So I'm going to add some heavy supports to the main islands that I see right here. So I start using my arrow keys, and as soon as I see a new island pop up, I'm going to add a heavy support. If I need more supports, because you can see that there's a lot of like red in those areas, I'm going to change to a medium support so that it doesn't damage my sculpture as much. I'm going to add all of these points right here. I'm going to keep using my up key, and again, if I see that I might need a couple of extra supports, medium supports are fine. You can use heavy supports on this like bottom part of the feet, because those are going to be stuck to the base. So sometimes I'd rather have some very, very strong supports than risk losing the print, because one of the bad things about having a failed print is if the print fails, you have to do a whole process of cleanup with your machine, and then you also need to you waste a lot of resin, and resin, it's not super expensive, but it's also not super cheap. So if we can avoid having this sort of mistakes, that's always a better compromise. So I usually prefer to have a lot of extra, maybe unnecessary supports on the bottom parts of my models, just to make sure that they print nicely, and then or rather than having a bad print. So there we go. Now, for instance, that's another floating bit. If I do not support that, then all of this section there will fail. So it's very important that we add a couple of supports right there. And then as soon as it touches the like the core or the main part of the object, then we're fine. You can see all of that part, we don't need any supports because everything is printing on top of itself. There, see that? Small little, like super simple, super small, like little island. That could be a problem, so it's a good idea to add at least a light support right there, just to be safe. So that way, when that little island is printed, we can be sure that there's at least a small support there, making sure that it does not print into thin air. Usually, that's why I did not keep any hard edges on the sculpting, because every hard edge that we have tends to create an island. So by minimizing the what's the word, the hard edges on our models, we can guarantee that we're not going to have as many islands. So all of those, as you can see, all of that section, this whole section right here, we don't need any support because everything's printing on top of itself. But then here on the arm, boom, big island again. So that big island right there, probably medium support. The bigger the island, the bigger the support that's recommended, just to make sure that it does not fail. Again, I'd rather have a couple of extra supports, even if it means a couple of extra like damage on our pieces, than adding or having more elements. There we go. So that arm is perfect. There we go. On this other side, you can see the beginning of the arm is fine. Like we actually don't need any support in that area. I'm still gonna add just one, just to be safe, but there's a very brief moment where this is a single island. That's where we need to add the support. Right now we're only adding medium supports. We don't need heavy supports anymore. And again, we just want to make sure that we don't have any issues right here. Now that's going to be a problem. Remember the little crystal we did? That's a really long island. Very risky. So I would definitely add a couple of like light supports on that whole like line right there to make sure that that element prints nicely. So as you can see, that should print nicely, and as soon as it touches the character, that should be like good enough. If you want to be extra safe, I would definitely add just a couple more extra supports there on the crystal to make sure it doesn't fall, especially because it's a big heavy piece of geometry, and if we don't have anything supporting that geometry, it can also break or separate from the print, and that also is a failed print. That's a finger right there, another one right there. And again, just for extra support, one more there should be fine. Most of the fingers should start appearing nicely. There we go. Now again, since the arm is really heavy, I would probably add just a couple of light supports there for support to make sure that we're not missing anything. And once we're happy with the overall result, we can check how much this is going to cost and how much this is going to take to print. So I'll do one final pass right here. Again, just very quickly, trying to be very precise and making sure that I'm not missing any point on my character. I'm paying attention to any island that might pop up at any point, because I know any island that's not supported is going to fail, and that fail could cause the whole thing to fail. Sometimes the light bleed will save you, especially with very tiny areas, but again, you don't want to risk it because it's very messy to clean everything back. There we go. Now again, from just a general safe perspective, I'm going to add a couple of light supports on the back of the character, just to make sure that the statue or the little miniature here remains stable. That's another thing. If you have the statue and you don't have support on a heavy area like the top of the torso and the head, then what could happen is that it's going to move a little bit when printing, and you're going to get some weird like seam lines as well, which is not what we want. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We can go back to this area. That's our base for our character. In this case, he's not going to be using any weapon or anything. And we can go to the slice option. Now, this software right now, it's already set up for my particular printer. And you can see it's telling me, hey, it's going to take 14 like milliliters of volume from resin. It's going to weigh 15 grams. And price, it's going to be less than $1. So usually a bottle of resin nowadays, it's like $20, I think, the 500 milliliter ones, and it can go all the way to like $40 for a full liter. And as you can see, this is wasting like very little resin. You're gonna waste a little bit more than this because there's always a little bit of waste when cleaning up the element and the supports, but this is like neglectable, right? Like this is very few or very little elements. Now, another thing, as we mentioned, with 3D printing that's really cool is the fact that 3D printing can allow you to print multiple of these guys. So if I just Control-C, Control-B, I can print 3 copies of this guys, for instance. And let's copy three bases as well. So we can do 3 copies of this guys and 3 bases at the same time. Okay, because like opposed to how a filament printer works, where it needs to go and follow the path. Where's the little, there we go. So when we take a look at the filament printer, the way a filament printer works is kind of like a hot glue gun, like a very filament 3D printer, like a very fine hot glue gun. And what it does is it needs to go over the whole like layer, and then it bumps one layer up. So if you have multiple elements, like let's say you're printing, I don't see an example right here, but let's say you're printing this hand right here, so that it needs to go through the whole like form of the hand first, and then it bumps one layer. And resin does every single part of the layer is hardened at the same time, and then it bumps up and it creates or generates the next layer for our characters. So let's say we want to print 3 of this guys right here. If we slice now and we take a look at how much this is going to cost, we're going to see that again, just $1.3. It's 46 grams that we're going to be like wasting or investing on our little sculptures right here, but it's nothing. It's nothing compared to what's the word? It's nothing compared to what like a miniature would cost at the store, right? So that's one of the cool things about 3D printing, the fact that you can make this really cheap. And as you can see, the level of detail that we were able to capture here should be fairly good. Like it should look quite nice once we have it ready on the printer. So I'm gonna save this real quick. Let's go to the desktop again, and we're gonna save this. Well, actually, I'm gonna do a couple of modifications. These are a little bit more technical aspects, but when the plate lowers on the resin printer, so when you're working with a resin printer, these are some like very common errors that you might encounter. The first one is suction. When this thing goes down, when the plate goes down and it touches the little tank and it hardens the resin, it will then have a tug of war between the resin tank and the platform. If the resin tank wins, then the print fails because you lose all of the things that you've printed so far, and they get stuck to the base. Usually that's not a problem, but there are a couple of things that could make this a little bit more difficult. And one of them, as I was mentioning, is suction. So if we go back here to the character, we're gonna see that there are certain parts of the character, certain cross sections like this one's right here, where there's a lot of volume being hardened at the same time. When you have big volumes like this, the tug of war that happens between the platform and the bed of the resin printer becomes a lot stronger, and this is where you might get some of those errors. In this particular case, I've printed hundreds of miniatures. It's not going to happen. Like, we're not going to have any issue. But if you're printing a really big character and you have a very like big cross section like this, you will have a little bit of an issue. That's why these bases right here are supported the way they are, because if we were to print these bases like completely flat to the platform, then the suction that they would generate would be quite big. So suction is one of those things that we want to be careful about, and by minimizing this, we're getting we're getting better odds for our 3D print. Alan Reen is asking, for 1 set print and also for 3 set prints, it shows the same time. Yes, because remember, as I was mentioning, when you have your 3D printer, you will have everything hardened at the same time. So it's not like the filament 3D printer where it needs to go through the profile of every single thing and do it. It does everything at the same time. It's kind of like a copy machine where it will just like expose the whole layer at the same time. So for instance, when we're in layer 131, all of the supports are going to be exposed at the same time. If this was a filament printer, you would need to go to each one of this and leave a little bit of material on each one of these points, and that's why a filament printer takes so long to do it. However, one of the advantages of filament printer, it's a lot cheaper. Like you can get, I think, like a full like kilograms spool of plastic for like $10 or something. So it's really, really, really cheap. And for big things, especially for cosplay things, it's really, really good as well. So we're gonna slice, and again, talking a little bit about the suction that we were just mentioning. I know that we're not really going to be having any issues with this particular elements right here. Like the suction is not going to be too much at any particular point. However, if we lower the lift speed right here, by default this is set to 80 millimeters per minute. If we lower this lift speed, we're going to make the suction less intense, because again, this is a tug of war that happens when this thing is being exposed. So if it tries to do the tug of war really quickly, that's where things can just like split from the printing platform. So I usually like to lower mine to 50 millimeters. This will increase the printing time a little bit. As you can see, almost like 30-40 minutes extra time for our printing, but it should be a lot less intense. Entertainment is asking, can a business be started with consumer grade printers? Yes, of course. Like a lot of people online, they sell this figures right here. I'm gonna be giving this away for free, but a lot of people sell this guys, and or not this guys specifically, but like miniatures for role-playing games, and they usually sell the commercial license as well, so you can subscribe to them and they will allow you to sell their models. If you do your own models, well, then you're free to sell them as much as you want. Just be careful about copyright and all that sort of stuff, because it can get into some interesting territory over there. What is the name of my 3D printer? That's a great question. So I am using the Elegoo Mars. There are I would say two main brands of 3D printers. Elegoo is one of them, and Anycubic is the other one. They're like the main competition. I believe they're both Chinese. I personally prefer Elegoo. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly why. I think it was because when I did my research, it had less like installing issues, but that was like 3 or 4 years ago when these things were first starting. Nowadays, both of them work perfectly fine, and most of this you can find on Amazon, and they are really good. Like the new printers can get some really nice quality in the last couple of editions that they've been releasing. This is the one that I have, by the way. In the last couple of editions, they're using something called a mono LCD screen. So it's a screen that only has black and white instead of having like RGB. It only has black and white. So it's way more precise, way faster, and the build plate is a lot bigger. If you're gonna be like printing very big like sculptings, I would recommend one called the Elegoo Saturn, which has like double the amount of like print volume. So people that like to print like action figures or collectibles. I have one, this one. Give me 1 second. So this is the character. Let me turn on the screen over on this side. I'm gonna go full screen. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Let's go full screen. There we go. There we go. So this is the big bad evil guy from my campaign. Her name is Gavala, and it's a big figure, right? Like this is not for gameplay, but we did 3D print. I sculpted this one and we 3D printed it, and thanks to the fact that we had a big volume, I was able to 3D print her in two runs. So one run was for the base, which is again quite big if you compare it to like a traditional mini, and then another plate was for the full body. The full body was split into separate parts, but yeah, this is like production ready. Now, of course, if you wanted to do this for like an even bigger statue, you would need to segment your element into more and more pieces. Let me change the screens again. There we go. And over here. There we go. So yeah, you can definitely print like super big stuff or super small stuff. Anycubic is also really good. I've heard a lot of good things about it. The cool thing about Anycubic is I believe the community is a little bit bigger, so there is a little bit more support. But these are meant to be kind of like, I wouldn't say like with planned obsolescence, is that the word? But they do tend to break. Like they're not disposable, but there's a lot of parts that you probably will need to buy every now and then, like screens or like certain screws or something like that. But still, they're great machines, to be honest. Like you can get some really cool things out of them, and I think that's it's one of the big pluses of 3D printing. So with this here, as you can see, the models are ready to be 3D printed. I will 3D print 3 of them. I would love to be able to send some of them to other places here, but the shipping from Mexico is really complicated, really costly. But again, the model is going to be available for free to anyone. I'll share the link as soon as I have it up. And I know we still have a little bit of time, so I want to use this last extra time that we have to talk a little bit about rendering, to present your sculpt, because I know this could be something that people are looking for to create your own sculptures and maybe sell them or something. And the best thing you can do to sell something is to present it in the best possible way. So we're gonna go to Blender, and we're gonna be rendering it right there. Let's see, we got another question. How we combine bottom part and top part after printed? Do we have to use glue? Yes, I use glue, just super glue. Because some people like to change bases, some people don't like using bases, so it's all personal preference. Some people like to print the base and the figure at the same time. I personally prefer to keep them separate if you want to do like a little diorama or something. So yeah. Yeah, I think Anycubic has a little bit more support than Elegoo, but both of them are really good. Yes, we're gonna do a clay render right now. So let's render or close this. There we go. So yeah, we're finished with the sculpting. I think this guy looks really cool. So let's close this. Well, first of all, let's save the main sculpting file before anything bad happens, and let's close ZBrush. No. Okay. So going back to Blender, as I was mentioning, one of the things that we need to do, or it would be really good if we do it, is to do a clay render, right? We have a really cool sculptor. We could just like create a nice little presentation page to bring people into this product right here, and it would be great if we can showcase in the better light possible. So the interesting thing about rendering is that a lot of people would just take a screenshot of this one and be like, yeah, that's it, that's all we need. And yes, it would definitely look okay, but it's a lot better if we can add just a little bit of light and a little bit of color to the whole thing. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create first a plane. Shift A, mesh, and we're gonna create a plane. We're gonna make this a big plane. I'm gonna grab the edge on this plane right here, and I'm gonna extrude it in C. And then at this edge right here, I'm gonna bevel it, and I'm gonna give it a couple of divisions to make it like a round bevel. Let's shade it smooth, and there we go. This is the famous infinite plane. I use this all the time to get just a nice background for a character. Now this is gonna be your camera. You can jump to your camera by clicking on this button right here. And once we're inside of the camera, I'm actually gonna press the letter N, and I'd like to change my view to camera to view, so that when I move and rotate inside of Blender, we can like find the perfect position right here. I'm gonna go to the rendering options, and we're gonna change this to 2K. So it's gonna be 2048 by 2048. So it's gonna be a square render. That way we can get something more appealing for like social media. Let's rotate on Z and push the background so that it's a little bit more like this. And actually, let's do something like that. There we go. Probably gonna make this a little bit less zoom, so something like that. There we go. Let's rotate this in C again, because we want to have this straight on the back. There we go. So that's gonna be our render view. That's gonna be the direction from where we're gonna be rendering our character. Now, what we need to do is we need to add 3 lights. Just 3 lights. Don't worry, it's gonna be super simple to follow, and it's gonna give us a super nice result. So the first type of light that I want to add is an HDRI. You can find this in Polyhaven. Polyhaven is this free site that has commercially available HDRIs, and this HDRI technique that we're using is called image-based lighting. So we're going to be using an image, in this case any of the images that you can find right here. I'm going to use this Pine Attic that I really like, and we can use an image to illuminate the scene where we're in to generate a better result. So I'm going to go to this environment element right here, which is the little world inside of Blender. And in the color option, I'm going to plug in an environment texture. We're going to open. This should be on my downloads. So it should be right here, Pine Attic. There we go. And hit open image. And what's going to happen if we go to this third option, which is the rendering option or the shading option, or actually if we go all the way to rendering, we're going to have the image like introducing light into our scene. Okay. Now, this viewport that we're seeing right now, it's called the Eevee viewport, which is a real-time rendering engine that we have inside of Blender. It's really, really, really good, but at the same time, it's not as exact or precise as a ray tracing engine that we might have in other softwares. So I'm going to go to the little camera right here, and I'm going to change that. We're going to go from this render engine to Cycles. And what Cycles does, as you can see, it's going to give us a way, way more precise render. It's definitely taking a little while here. And I'm actually going to change the device to GPU to make this even faster. There we go. And that way, we're going to get a very nice like render here on our character. Now, I'm going to go back to the little world, and I'm going to change the strength to something like a 0.1. Because I want to really lower the intensity of this, maybe even less, like 0.01. I want to make this really, really dark right now. And we're going to go Shift A, and we're going to create a new light. And it's going to be an area light. There we go. So this area light, as you can see, it's back here. I'm going to move this, and I'm going to use this to illuminate like the top part of our character right here. As you can see, it's a light that's going to be hitting the top part of the character. I'm going to move this a little bit more to the front and point this towards the character, like right around there. And that's it. Kind of like a Rembrandt sort of like a position where we see a little bit of the corner of the nose, something like that. Now I'm gonna go to the properties of the light, and we can increase the power a little bit. Let's see something like a 50. There we go. And that's looking a lot better. I'm gonna change also the color of the light. I like to make my lights a little bit more colorful, so I'm gonna give this a sort of like a red warm tint, something like that. I'm gonna bring this all the way to 100. There we go. That's a lot better. Now we can use again our HDRI, going back to the world, and we can make this a little bit more intense. So we're gonna bring in more light into the scene to get rid of all of this like dark shadows that we have over here. So instead of 0.01, I'm gonna go back to 0.1. As you can see here, it's gonna light everything up quite nicely. Then I'm gonna grab and create the third light. Remember, I told you just 3 lights is all we need. This is a very, very basic render setup called 3-point light setup. We're gonna create a light right here, and it's gonna be an area light. And this area light, we're gonna move to the side. We're gonna point it to the back part of the head of the character, and we're really gonna crank up the intensity. So we're gonna go to something like 200. And what this will do, as you can see, is we'll create a very nice highlight on the back part of the character. This is called a rim light. And the reason why the rim light is so important is because, as you can see right here, it allows us to separate the character from the background, creating a really, really nice tone right here. Now, what else can we do here? Well, we can of course change the material of the character. Right now, the material that it has is the same material as the background, and therefore, we're not really seeing something that looks as nice. So if we select the character right here and we go to the material section, we can add a new material, and this material is going to be a sort of like clay material. So I'm going to go for like a dark red, and I'm going to bring down the value so it's a little bit darker, and there you go. We can also increase something called the roughness to make it rougher, or bring it down to make it a little bit more glossy, kind of like plastic. I think the saturation is a little bit high, so let's bring the saturation down. There we go. And we get this sort of like clay render effect for our character. We can play with the camera a little bit. I'm gonna move it a little bit to the side so that we can see like the hands and the crystal right there. That looks really nice. But one thing that I really liked about the concept that we've been using so far are those super cool like glowing eyes that the character has. So why not add them? And I think that's gonna be pretty much it for tonight. So we're gonna go mesh, UV sphere. And we're gonna bring this UV sphere to where one of the eyes is. Let's make this really, really small. Right click, shade smooth, so it looks very smooth. A lot smaller. And we're gonna bring it right there inside of the eye. There we go. Almost there. There we go. There we go. And we're gonna Shift D and move it to the other eye. Push it in. Let's try to align them as close as possible as we can. I mean, we already have the sculpted eyes, so they should be a good position to have. There we go. Now I'm gonna select one of this. I'm gonna go to the materials. I'm gonna add a new material. The color is gonna be this electric blue color. And the important thing is all the way down here on the emission, we're gonna turn the emission up and turn the blue color up. And we're gonna assign the exact same material to this one. And there we go. And one thing we can do even is we can go to the emission. And right now the value of the emission is set to 1. We can set this to 5, for instance. And this is gonna make this like super, super glowy. And if we take a look, that's gonna give us the final render. Lastly, just to get our final render and be able to upload the Gumroad file with all of this like nice presentation, I actually think I kind of want the first area light to be a little bit stronger. So I'm gonna go 150, even maybe like 200. This is again where you can spend so much time just tweaking things to make them look as nice as possible. But we get this and we can just say render and render image. We're gonna render now our full image right here. And there's a super cool thing that Blender has nowadays, which is a denoiser. So after a little bit of time, you're gonna see that all of this noise that we have right here, it's just gonna disappear. So right now, this is gonna like render for like hours and hours. We need to stop that. So to limit how much render we're gonna give this, if we go to the little option right here to the camera, we're gonna be able to tell it, hey, you know what? I only want you to render for 30 seconds. So we're gonna say render image, and this thing is gonna render for 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, again, I want you guys to like pay close attention to this, because this is we were talking about artificial intelligence, right? Well, this is thanks to artificial intelligence that we can get this denoiser to clean up our image. So as soon as this finishes, look at all the noise that we have right here, all of these pixels. Well, they're gonna be gone, like pretty much like if it was a freaking magic. So 5 more seconds for the render to be done. And once this render is done, you're gonna see all of this noise just like magically disappear thanks to the denoiser. There we go. It's gone. So now we get this super smooth effect, super smooth like production ready render. This is 2K, so it's more than full HD. It's gonna look really, really cool. And yeah, we're pretty much ready to get this into printing. Image, we can save this image. Again, I'm just gonna save it on our desktop right now. We're gonna call this a Vigilant. And my friends, I'm happy to say that we've been able to finish a full 3D Mini in a little bit less than 4 hours. We went over the whole process, starting with a very, very, very basic base mesh, which I can actually get in here, by the way. So let's import. It was the FBX desktop. Let's get the Vigilant base mesh. There we go. So this was our original base mesh. We started with this 3 hours ago, a little bit over 3 hours ago, and we've been able to convert it into this cool miniature ready for 3D printing. And there we go. What do you guys think? Any question, any comment to people watching on the stream? What do you guys think? Final result done. Not bad for a 3-hour sculpt, I would say. Fernando, thank you very much for your support on the stream. Thank you for the super chat. Well, so yeah, this is pretty much, there you go. Fernando says, I think he looks dope. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Entertainment Jerk is asking how to print or build moving parts in prints. I saw a great miniature with a giant eye that can be rotated by hand. Yeah, so you can definitely do articulated elements inside of 3D printing. That's something that can be done. I've actually never tried it myself. I've always done like static meshes, but as long as you have the tolerances right, like you know where things are gonna rotate or flip around, you should be able to do it. Alan Rain says, thanks for the stream, learned a lot. You're welcome, my friend. And Nilesh says, amazing artwork, loved the whole process. Glad you liked it, my friends. We definitely broke my personal record with the longest stream so far. Cool. Well, so Pinky, that's it, my friend. Do you have any question? Anything else I can do for you before we wrap this up? There we go. Entertainment Jerk, thank you, my friend. Thank you, too. And, well, I guess that's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to close up the stream now. If you guys want to see a similar process that we're going to be doing tomorrow, or in about 9 hours, it's going to be tomorrow at 10 a.m. for me. Well, actually, it's about to be 1 a.m. So it's in about 8 hours. I'm just gonna get some sleep, and then we're gonna be back with another character, and we're gonna be following a similar process. So I'll keep you guys posted with the other stuff, and yeah, that's it, my friends. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. Let me just. That's it.